Good evening. I'd like to open the January 26, 2016 Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education meeting. Dr. Drady, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Would you please stand? Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas noches. Si hay alguien en el público que desee escuchar la interpretación en español de esta junta, tenemos los aparatos disponibles para hacerlo. Gracias.
We also have headsets for the hearing impaired. Please indicate if you need a headset. Dr. Drady, introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions?
So I'll just have the superintendent's report.
Okay.
On that. From January through April, the Parent Resource Center is hosting a series of workshops and trainings on dyslexia, transition plans, study habits, positive parenting strategies, and academic tools for parents that support their child's learning. The Parent Resource Center flyer is available at the back of the room. Last night, San Marcos High School hosted the Festival de Cantoria, formerly known as the District Choral Showcase. The event was well attended and well received. Choirs from all of our K-12 schools participated and did a wonderful job. This past Sunday, Dos Pueblos High School's Amir Abu Shair moderated a conversation with Salma Khan, a former hedge fund analyst and a founder of the Khan Academy. The Granada Theater was packed, and Mr. Khan delivered an engaging, thoughtful discussion on education. The third annual Academy Showcase took place a few days after our last board meeting. Nearly 1,000 people attended, and the academies did a great job of presenting their programs. Every station had a Spanish-speaking student on hand to talk about their respective experience. There's still time to catch Santa Barbara High's Music of the Night performance, which runs through the end of January. Our district is a co-sponsor of a new film that will be shown for free on Sunday, March 6th at 2 o'clock at the Arlington Theater. Titled West of the West, the new documentary taps into geology, history, and exploration of the Channel Islands. The first of the 14 tales in this film was written by highly esteemed Santa Barbara High School graduate, Dr. Tanya Atwater, class of 1960. At the age of 28, Dr. Atwater wrote a major paper on the San Andreas Fault, which was regarded as a great contribution to the science of plate tectonics. It was a definitive work in the study of geology. In 1997, Dr. Atwater was elected to the National Academy of Science. West of the West is an exceptional film that sheds light on the islands of our shore. More information on how to register for this event and background information on the film is available on our website. And finally, American School and University recognized La Cumbre Junior High's auditorium modernization and work of PMSM's architects. Receipt of this outstanding design plaque honors the education, organization, and architect of the accomplishments. And Dr. Ramirez will show the plaque in a second here. We are very proud of the modernization work done without compromising the historic features of this beautiful auditorium. We are grateful for our community's investment in our schools. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Drady. Board, any comments or correspondence?
First, just a big thank you to Barbara. You mentioned the Academy Showcase. You were all over that, Barbara. And I went down to the library and happened to look at the display down there for the 150th anniversary. And again, I'm sure that's your work there too. So thank you very much. That's it.
Any other comments, correspondence? I just want to mention that I went to, actually, Ms. Limon and I both went to the Special Education Advisory Committee for a district the other night, last week. And Dr. Dradi did a presentation on the LCAP, which is, really good. And some of the statistics actually for me, were quite enlightening because it reminded me of how far we've gotten, but how much work we still need to do, and especially around looking at equity issues across our district. So I really want to appreciate Dr. Dradi for continuing to talk about that through our LCAP. Ms. Limon.
And I just remembered. I also had the opportunity to attend the task force on South Coast youth gangs, and I just wanted to let the board know that it's actually having a conversation about changing the name. And it made the group made a decision to change the name primarily because the number of, and Ms. Wagner, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the number of students with gang-related offenses of sorts has gone down. So now the committee's focus is really just thinking more about youth safety overall. And so I wanted to let the board know, so if you see communication, that group is transitioning to thinking about broader youth safety in our community, as opposed to just students with gang offenses of sorts.
So do we have a new name?
Yes, we do, and we voted on it, and I don't, okay, do you?
It's the South Coast Task Force on Youth Safety.
Very good. Actually, a little easier to pronounce. Yes.
I'm just
Mr.
curious, you say you both went to the CPAC parent meeting. How did they respond to the LCAP? Did they relate from a special education advisory committee standpoint and give input?
I think a lot of the questions really revolved around teacher and teacher credentialing and the ability for the curriculum to be modified so that students who are in special education still have an experience of our core curriculum. So a lot of that sort of questions came up. And if you want to add, Dr. Dradi.
Yes, absolutely. My take on it is that they took it as an opportunity to learn about the programs that we actually have in place. Obviously, them looking at the data wasn't the greatest thing. It impacts a lot of their children. But the comments I've received from the parents from that meeting in our online program suggest that they say continue doing what you're doing, and they thanked us a lot for bringing out the information.
Thank you. Ms. Simon.
And I'll just add, too, that I think what I've seen consistent with the LCAP is that when we have anyone in the community looking at it and going through it, there's some parts that I think are more relevant than others. And so there's those parts where you look at the bigger picture and you don't know how to think about some of the issues. So the feedback you get sometimes isn't as rich in some areas, but richer in areas that are familiar or that are of great and deep interest to the folks that are looking at it.
Moving on to an announcement of closed session action. We don't have anything to announce. Later on the agenda, we'll have student discipline, and so we'll get to that point later. Public comments on non-agenda matters within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education. I think we have a few.
Yes, we do. We have 3. And first, we have Jessica Balanoff, followed by Paul Freeman, and then Jen Brown and Don Fitzgerald.
And Mr. Rickman will give you a 30-second warning. I know there's a warning on the podium, but look for his warning.
I'm going to change up the order a little bit, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Be my guest.
We sort of came together.
Okay.
Separate cars, but we're here for the same reason. I'm Paul Freeman. Thank you. I have a prepared statement I'll read. Ladies and gentlemen of the board and administration, thank you for providing our group, the Santa Barbara County Alliance for Arts Education, with an opportunity to continue our dialogue with you around the district's plan of making visual and performing arts available to all students. This is a goal that we support and we know will have direct impact on our children, your students. Almost 2 years ago, we approached the board and proposed to add a full-time staff position to focus on the development and execution of the district's visual and performing arts plan. Gratefully, this past year, you funded and hired Donna Ronzoni as Director of VAPA and Special Projects, and she's here. You also contributed a significant portion of the LCAP discretionary budget towards keeping music teachers at each of the elementary schools. Thank you for your investments in these areas. We know that the district is again gearing up to make choices about how to allocate funds in the coming school year, and that's why we're here again this evening, to encourage the district to continue to invest in arts and arts education as part of the 2016-2017 LCAP. We have 3 specific areas we'd like to propose. First, that you continue your investments in the VAPA director position and the music teachers, as you did last year, or this year. Secondly, that you add additional release and professional development time to key staff positions such as principals, art teachers, and district administration to assist Dr. Ronzoni in the orientation and training time needed to build awareness and to develop the integration plan for arts at each school. And finally, that you allocate new additional discretionary budget towards the continuation of visual arts education at your elementary schools, similar to the funding levels that you have already done with music. And I will say also, just as an add-in, that in your search for a replacement for Dr. Cash, that you also look for someone with equally enthusiastic arts interests. So appreciate that too. The district has shown itself to be a leader in so many academic areas, often well beyond the state and federal standards. The California Standard for Arts includes programming in all disciplines of performing and visual arts, something we know the district can achieve with a commitment to growing arts education funding each year. With your commitment to execute and keep arts as an important part of your plan for students and our continued support with resources and advocacy, we believe we can give district students the kind of arts experience they want and need. Thank you for your consideration and for your continued support. We really appreciate it. And I have copies of that if anybody, I don't know if I can give those to you.
Yes, thank you.
Hello. I'm speaking today as a graduate of the Santa Barbara School District program and as a teacher currently working throughout the system. My name is Jessica Hambright Balanoff. I have contracts at schools like San Marcos High School, Santa Barbara High School, Goleta Valley Junior High School, La Colina, Montecito Union, Crane, Marymount, Laguna, Cold Spring School. I also help with youth efforts like Santa Barbara Children's Chorus, Upstage Left Productions, Santa Barbara School of Performing Arts, and the San Marcos Entrepreneurship Academy, in addition to teaching at local dance studios and working with programs like Fun in the Sun, the Performing and Visual Arts Camp, Everybody Dance Now, and American Dance and Music, which has put me on campuses that include Franklin, McKinley, Cleveland, Monroe, and La Cumbre schools. So I think it's safe to say that I have a pretty good understanding of the diversity of the students in our town. And I am speaking on behalf of all of them, because when we teach the arts to the students, the result is always the same. And I can say with certainty that integrating arts learning as a core curriculum subject is invaluable to everyone's learning process. Through the low-income families, working-class families, high-earning families, it's all the same. So not only do the kids learn to open their minds and think for themselves, but harnessing their creativity with paint and sculpture, music notes, dance moves, dramatic readings, they learn to communicate with their peers in their classes in a way that isn't possible in just a regular academic setting. And when we create those better listeners, those better communicators, people who understand emotion and expression, you create a more just and tolerant society. And I think we can all agree that's something that we want. So I'm asking to please allocate money for the arts to put music into our children's lives, to put color and shape into their lives, to put expression into the routines, and to help us all be accountable for what we're teaching our students. And please allocate those funds so that we as teachers can feel supported in the mission that I think we all know we want for our students. So thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jen Brown, and I'm a member of the Santa Barbara County Alliance for Arts Education, and I'm also a parent of a 5th grade student at Roosevelt Elementary. With me here tonight is Don Fitzgerald, who's a parent of a TK and a 2nd grade student at Roosevelt. We are also here to encourage the district to continue to invest in arts education as part of the 2016-2017 LCAP, and to emphasize the importance of a district-run elementary visual arts program that reaches all public elementary schools in SBUSD. My daughter's visual arts experiences at Roosevelt have fluctuated broadly over the past 5.5 years. The first year, she had a full-time visual arts teacher. The next year, she had no visual arts teacher. The next year, there was an artist in residence program that reached 2 grades. The next year, there was a .6 art teacher, and the year after that, this year, there was a .8 art teacher. The only thing these visual art programs have in common is that they were PTO funded. I'd like to talk to you about why leaving visual arts program planning and funding to a PTO presents a problem. First, there can be no consistency in visual arts programming because the parents cannot count on achieving a certain level of fundraising each year. When there's a decline in fundraising, the most expensive items are often cut from the budget, and unfortunately for us at Roosevelt, that's meant the art teacher. Second, the integrity of the visual arts program suffers. When parents fundraise to fill a teacher position, the boundaries between parent, teacher, and district become blurred. Well-meaning parents try to create new programming, leaving a select group with really far too much control over curriculum and over program direction. Third, the quality of the curriculum suffers. No one makes the argument that a .5 math teacher is good enough or that a school is lucky to have a language arts program. Why are we making these concessions with the arts? Anything less than a full-time district-provided teacher at each school is just that. It is less. No matter what elementary, junior, or senior high our children attend, we all want the same thing for them. We want equitable access to high-quality, consistent arts programming. We thank you for your continuing support and commitment to the arts in Santa Barbara Unified.
Hi, I'm Dawn Fitzgerald. I have a 2nd grader and a TK student at Roosevelt. And I can attest with my 2nd grader to what Janice was saying. We've had no art, a little bit of art, a little bit more art. And with my TKer, I just only hope that we could have a more consistent program. I've also gotten really involved this year in fundraising and with the annual fund and with corporate sponsorship. And sadly, I'm sort of here to report that we are in a steady decline. A school that once had some really robust fundraising is taking a nosedive. And, our goal is obviously to turn that around. But it's a really scary place to be when what you want is a great visual arts program. And, coming from, as an outsider, I came from LA and I came here and I was just so awed by the music program, and it's something that leaves you very fulfilled, and we're honored to have it, and it feels like it's a place that has a home. And to me, the arts program has always been like, what's going on? It's like, it's here, it's there, it's not here. It feels like it's renting some space occasionally, and I just would ask that someone give it a home, and I think that it will thrive in the same way. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments.
Yes, thank you.
She didn't pull out a separate card. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Moving on to consent agenda. Board, do you have anything you want to pull? Mr. Herron.
No, I don't want to pull anything, but I'll have comment when it comes to discussion.
Okay. I do. There on human resource recommendations. My wife is on the human resources list, so I would like to vote on the rest of the minus the human resources recommendations.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda minus item D9, the human resources recommendations.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Discussion?
Okay, go ahead.
Just a couple comments, a couple questions I had that had been answered, but I wanted to point them out. On D6, the agreement between the Bowl Foundation and the school district.
D5?
D5, I'm sorry. Covering the transfer of the graduation to the Bowl. My question was, is that a proper use of bond funds? It's in the background, it says we're going to use bond funds for that. And the answer I got back preliminarily, yes. And so I just want to make it known that I did have a question on whether that was a proper use of bond funds for a graduation ceremony. The other is on D7, the GLAD program. Even though the agenda says there's a memorandum between the district and, between Cleveland and Santa Barbara Community Academy and GLAD, it's really an agreement between GLAD and Cleveland, but I've been assured that other schools can participate.
And I just want to follow up on Mr. Herron's comment to clarify on the Bowl and the Santa Barbara High School graduation in terms of the bond fundings for members of the public that are not necessarily reading the document and understanding that Santa Barbara High graduation will be taking place at the Bowl because of construction at Peabody Stadium that is being paid for by bond funds, and so it's all part of the sort of facilities tear-up process there.
Yeah, it's under interim housing.
Yeah. That's what I've been told, but I was told preliminarily it's been approved. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that it becomes an absolute.
So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we need a motion to approve human resource recommendations.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we approve D9 for human resources recommendations.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Abstentions? Aye. So passed 4 with 1 abstention, Dr. Paz. Now we are moving to item E, public hearing, but there are no items for public hearing, so we move to the action agenda. The first item is board action on student discipline, case number 2015-16-22.
In case 2015-16-22, I move to approve the findings and recommendations of the Administrative Hearing Panel, except for the suspended expulsion. Instead of it being a suspended expulsion, it will be a full expulsion for 1 school year ending in June 2016.
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Moving on to board action for petition for readmission of expelled students, case number 2014-15-13.
In case 2014-15-13, I move to approve the petition for readmission.
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the next one, board action petition for readmission of expelled student, case number 2014-15-42.
And in case 2014-15-42, I move to approve the petition for readmission.
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We move to item number 4, acceptance of Measure Q 2010 Citizens Oversight Committee Annual Report. Mr. Hetniuk.
Thank you, Dr. Paz, members of the board. Annually, the bond oversight committees give a report to the board on their observation and oversight of the expenditure of bond funds. The report does not need to be approved, but it does need to be accepted. Typically, our chairman or chairwoman of the committees are here. Eric Peterson could not make it tonight. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
Board, do we have any questions? If not, can I entertain a motion to accept the report?
I'll move to accept the report with gratitude for the committee for the work that they've done.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Het-Young. I guess you're going to stay for the next one as well. Acceptance of Measure R 2010 Citizens Oversight Committee Annual Report.
Yes, for the Measure R, Chairman Greg Levin couldn't be here tonight, and we were aware of that ahead of time, and we have a committee member, Frank Stevens, here, who is representing the committee tonight, and if you have any questions, I'm sure he'd be glad to come up and answer them, and I'm sure he appreciates the gratitude of the board also.
Board, do we have any questions? No. May I entertain a motion to accept the Measure R 2010 Citizens Oversight Committee Annual Report?
So moved, and many thanks.
I'll second.
And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Moving on to item number 6, approval variable term waivers for adaptive PE.
Mr. Torina?
Thank you, President Dr. Paz, board members, and cabinet. Before you, we have a approval for a variable term waiver. And the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, the CTC, permits districts to credential teachers using a variable term waiver. These types of credentials can cover statewide shortage areas, specifically in the areas of special ed, and concerning this one is adaptive PE. The board is required to approve the waivers as an action item before the CTC acts as one of their regularly scheduled meetings. The variable term waiver for adaptive PE requires a minimum of 12 units of physical education. And both these teachers, both Christopher Holland and Anthony Linebaugh, are also currently in a program to receive their credential for adaptive PE teachers. So the recommendation is that we approve this for the variable term waivers for both Chris and for Anthony. Any questions?
Board, any questions?
I'll move approval of Resolution 2015/16-19 regarding elimination of classified services.
Mr. Herron, you are on the wrong item. We're at the approval.
Term waivers for adaptive PE.
Yes, that's correct.
I can't see.
You just skipped one, that's all.
I will second his changed motion.
Board, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torino. Moving on to item 7, approval resolution 2015-16-19 regarding the elimination of classified services.
Mr. Torina?
He's like, oh, yeah.
I couldn't see that.
My motion didn't pass.
Board members and cabinet, the Education Code 45117 and 45308 specify that the classified employees can only be laid off for lack of funds or lack of work within 60 days advance notice. With the closing of the preschool program at Las Flores, there will be a lack of work for 1.375 FTE housekeeper. District staff will collaborate with CSEA to ensure that the employment rights of impacted unit members will be addressed. And the recommendation is that the board adopt this resolution for the authorization of district to negotiate the effects with CSEA.
Board, any questions?
Now I'll move approval of Resolution 2015/16-19 regarding the elimination of classified services.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Herron, seconded by Ms. Idelson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We move to item number 8, approval of resolution 2015/16-21, resolution of intention of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Unified School District to establish the Santa Barbara Unified School District Elementary School Facilities Improvement District Number 1, and to authorize certain other actions.
Good evening, board members and members of cabinet. This resolution is before you tonight because the last time we went out for bonds, we were not a unified school district. Now that we are a unified school district, we need to create a separate district for our elementary schools if we decide to go out for bonds. You'll also notice in the resolution it mentions a number of $300 million, which is the maximum that we would go out for bonds over the period of time that we are a unified school district. So, Any questions?
Board, any questions? Ms. Parker?
Well, I had emailed the questions before, and they were nicely answered, but I will say that for the public, because I looked at it, and I just wanted to be really clear, first of all, that we're not, that this is preliminary steps, that this is not going out for a bond. It's just prep work so that someday, whether it's this year or 5 years from now, we can go out for the bond. There's not a time limit on it, there's a money limit on it.
Correct.
So we couldn't go for more than 300 million without going back and redoing a resolution, but that this is something that just makes it so that we have the flexibility to do that in the future. We could go for a 50 million bond 10 years from now. This just sets that up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? May I entertain a motion?
I will move to approve Resolution 2015-16, I can do this, 21-21, resolution of intention of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Unified School District to establish the Santa Barbara Unified School District Elementary School Facilities Improvement District Number 1, and to authorize other actions associated with that.
I second it.
Any other questions, discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
A motion passes. Motion made by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Idelson. Pass 5-0. Moving on to action item number 9, discussion and selection of a search firm for recruitment of a new superintendent. It's actually the board's action or item, so I'm going to move down a little bit and bring back another thing here. So let me start off by saying that one of the things, the pieces of homework that we had as a board was to have the board president and actually the board vice president do a little bit of reference checking with our 4 potential firms. And Ms. Idelson and I did manage to contact a number of people who had worked with all 4 firms. And we got some feedback for all of them. And just to put it in summary format, based on all the comments that we received back from all of the fellow board members who had worked with these firms, Ms. Idelson and myself feel that we could recommend, based on the references, Leadership Associates and HYA, excuse me. The other 2 firms didn't have recommendations that totally stood out. There were questions and issues that were raised by some of our fellow board members across the state, and that sort of separated those 2 versus the 2 that we both felt that we could consider as a board. And there were a few pieces that I wanted to share with you all in terms of some of the questions too that came up that I could share based on the comments we received. One is to not be too concerned about the timing in terms of trying to do all candidates. In fact, one of the people I contacted, and I believe Ms. Idelson also maybe have heard the same thing, that it's okay to have all the interviews take place in one day. And in fact, some people said it was a really great process to have them all done in one day because then you could compare. They're fresh in your mind. You don't have to think about comparing one with the other. So that was one interesting piece of information. And to do consider trying to get as much input throughout the process as possible through the community. Building that profile of the superintendent is really critical, and that helps if you're planning to do a confidential process. That's really important. The other piece of information that I received was through this process to make sure that you have a standing agenda item that speaks to the superintendent search so that we can update the public as to what's happening and so that they're kept abreast as we progress. That was another piece of information that was helpful for me, at least. Let me see what else. I think were those the main pieces. Ms. Idelson, would you like to add anything?
Sure.
Yes.
Some of the questions I asked and responses were interesting because they spoke to the use of technology and how these firms were recommending that the technology was very available to the board members to engage in doing some pre-screening and then coming together and having good, efficient use of their time when they were together as a board. And then centering in on, as Dr. Paz mentioned, what the high priorities from the stakeholders in terms of the surveys had been. So I'm also confident with the two firms that Dr. Paz just mentioned as being standouts in what we learned through checking references.
And I would say that all of the two that we recommended, of the people we contacted, we asked them, would you hire them again? They said, yes, absolutely. So that was helpful too. Mr. Herron, you have a question?
Did you ask any of them about this confidentiality process? Good,
Yes.
bad, indifferent?
Yeah, and yes, it came up a number of times, and I think the majority of the people I spoke with, almost all, I'd say all of them, said that that's probably the best process you should consider, because you will get better candidates. It's just, it's easier for the board to consider all those, and that there were actually one person where I talked to that said, they had considered doing a more open process, and then they talked to other boards who had done that similar process, and I said, no, don't do it. So the feedback that I got was do a confidential process. Just involve the community as much as you possibly can from the get-go in building that profile. Keep the community informed throughout the process, and that will help you. Ms. Idelson, you would like to add anything?
I think you've said it, and I think what I got from the references that was important to me was the sense of organization, that meeting the timeline, and then that they all liked the more efficient and also understanding the community as the piece. So yeah, it was.
And the other piece too that I know that we talked about or alluded to the last time we met was just the relationship that you want to have with the firm you're selecting. That you have to have that sense of trust with them. So if you have good people, they're going to work with you really well. So that was repeated actually with all the people I spoke to, because they mentioned it right off the bat, like, oh, they're great people to work with. I really felt like I was being told what was happening. I didn't feel like they were hiding. I even asked a number of times, were there any surprises in your process? And no one could recall any surprises or anything that was a negative with either the two firms that were saying we would recommend based on the reference checks.
Can I add to the record, we did receive a letter of recommendation for Jerry Fawcett of Dave Long and Associates from the President of the Board of Trustees of the Carpinteria Unified School District.
Thank you. Board, yes, Ms.
And
Limon.
I have a question for the both of you. Of the two firms that kind of rose to the top based on references, were there themes that you feel stood out for the top two firms, again, based on references? Or elements of what was really standout things that stood out?
For me, I think that the one thing that always seemed to come out was communication, that they felt like they were informed, board members were informed throughout the process, that they were brought up to speed all the time, including, I spoke to people who were not the board presidents at the time when they did their search, so they even felt like I was informed and I wasn't the board president. So it's like, okay, that's good to know, So that came up as a good theme. The other, just the quality of the work that they felt like the reference checks were really good of the candidates, and that they had done their homework and looking at them, and they felt like the packet they received was a good work done. So those two kind of stand out in terms of both of those firms.
And some of the standout things, I think that everyone I spoke to felt like there was a large quantity in the candidate pool, and they felt that that may have been the case no matter what company was chosen, that they're all pulling from the same pond, basically. And I think they were impressed with the quality of those candidates. And also, there was a sense that through this process, with one person I spoke to, that it brought their community together, that they felt very fractured before the process, and then in the end, not only did they get a new superintendent that they were happy with, but they also brought everybody together, and they were much better off through having a firm that was capable of that. So that was good. Did that answer help you, or?
Yeah. So, did you feel, the both of you feel that they're at equal standing grounds based at references, or is there a difference based just on references?
I did the one thing that, at least for the one firm that I asked about, they had different people. They asked, the people I spoke to asked me, so who are you going to be working with? And then I mentioned, and they said, well, that's not who we worked with. We worked with X, Y, and Z people. And so that's a consideration in terms of, it was with Leadership Associates. So that was a consideration for me to kind of think about. It's like, well, I wonder if our experience is going to be a little different if we have different people. But it's neither good or bad because it may be better. So that's one thing that I thought about that kind of made me think a little more about it. Ms. Idelson?
Similarly, I did not find that I was speaking to a reference that had used the same people. So for HYA, so there was a Northern California school of district of similar size.
The one thing that for Leadership Associates that I remember speaking to that was brought up was that since they're much more California focused and HYA was a little more national, that's why this particular board member chose to go with them and not HYA. Any other questions? Ms. Parker?
I just want to say thank you. I mean, that I know that was time-consuming, and it will be time-consuming, particularly for you, Dr. Paz, but also for you, Ms. Idelson, as we move forward, because there will be extra work on you all the way through. So thank you. That was very helpful, and honestly, I feel like we probably can't go wrong with those two. I lean towards Dr. Castrita and HYA because, for a couple of reasons. One is, we can hit the ground running when you're talking about building trust. I already know that I can trust him, and I don't need to build the relationship that I know that we would need to build first with Leadership Associates. So that's why I lean towards HYA. I also feel like there is more direct connection with the consultants in terms of being bilingual and bicultural, and that is helpful to our community. And so that's the direction I'm leaning, but honestly, I'm very happy to hear what other people have to say because I don't think we can go wrong.
Mr. Herr?
I came down with the same two. I guess, I agree with Ms. Parker with Mr. Castruda, Rudy, but I looked at the second in command, or the second. And I guess I just came down to Maria Ott. I liked her background and I liked her presence more than I liked Mr. Verdugo. I mean, they're probably both very, very good. I'm not going to say one's not good and one's, it's just I was more impressed with Maria. And I think, we've dealt with Rudy on many, many occasions. He's helped us tremendously. He understands and knows where we're coming from. He has a feel for, what's important to us in our district. And we've come a long way. The only negative I would have in going back, and maybe it was the sign of the times at that point, the candidates brought forward to us were not very good. If Dr. Cash hadn't have come up at the last second, I'm not sure we would have picked from any of the group that they brought forward. And so that sits in the back of my mind a little bit.
Ms. Limon?
I was looking forward to the conversation tonight, in part because I feel like there was different strengths that were brought to us by the groups. I think your references were probably consistent with where I was at, and I kind of thought about it, and I wanted to listen, to be honest with you, to what everybody else had to say, because I feel like it was really going to inform my deliberation of how I think about the issue. I agree with what's been said. We have developed a trust, and also there's an awareness of our district, of some of the maybe historical issues that have arisen in our district. So it's not starting completely fresh, and I think that there's something to be said about that with HYA. Although at the same time, I don't want any kind of history to in any way kind of supersede maybe the direction, right? So you have the history versus direction. And so I definitely want an open slate for thinking about the direction of the district. I do know, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that we've kind of heard about the reasons why an open, non-confidential search would be useful and important for transparency. But I do know that from the last search we did, there was not one person who interviewed that did not study, and I mean in depth, that document that was produced for our district. Like, people really looked at it, at every comment, and I felt really good about, wow, this is not going in vain. The individuals who were interviewed had looked into it and then had gone a step above and beyond to understand, well, why is it that X keeps coming up, or why is it that they're looking into it? So I truthfully thought that the document was not just a process, was not just something that we did to feel good, but something that was really used by the candidates to, one, decide whether or not this was a good district, was a good match for them, but two, they were very prepared to think about these issues in the direction. So I think I could probably go with either of the firms that have been selected. In regards to the applicant pool, I don't know that was a function of the firm as much as it maybe was a function of our times. And one of the questions I know I asked is, what do we do, or what does the firm do above and beyond to get a diverse pool, and in a diverse pool in all aspects of the way. But I also very quickly understood that from the last time we did a search, that is a limited pool. I mean, one, we know that the life of a superintendent is, what did they tell us, 3.75 years, and that it is a pipeline, and so in some ways that is a function of just where we're at as a state, and I've heard this from other school board members as well, and I'm attentive to that. So I can go either way, but and recognize kind of the strengths that both would bring to the table.
I just want to mention, or another point that in the discussion I'm thinking about that was also mentioned, I didn't put down my notes, but one thing that was brought up was to make sure and this was specific to HYA, that they're all-inclusive in their price. Because that was a concern from one of the people I spoke to, that they had seen a contract. The contract had looked really different than what they had presented. So that is something that I think that as a board member, if we were to entertain them as a firm, I want to make sure that we're not going to have any surprises in terms of cost and all of a sudden something comes up, because they came to us and we asked them questions. I know Mr. Herron asked the same question of all 4 firms about, and I think Ms. Parker as well, about having that meeting, that transition meeting, and would that be part of the cost? And I think we heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that that was an affirmative, that yes, that would be part of that. So I want to make sure that we get that if this is the direction we go. But either, that we have no surprises in that regard as well in terms of the cost. I know that Leadership Associates was very clear about saying that this is all-inclusive cost, we're not going to give you any surprises. So I think, and I'm only mentioning HYA because they were mentioned by one of my references, so yes.
And if I could comment on that, they did give us a price, but actually, if you look at the fee structure, there are elements. So I will give one example: independent background checks and media reviews. There is a price per candidate that is likely not in the fee structure. So I want to be clear that they've been open about their fee structure. However, we should know that there are some add-on pieces that are listed here in the even if you look at page 13 and 14 of their proposal, some add-on pieces that they've disclosed would be added to the price tag that they're giving us.
I was looking at the pages
Yeah, we're
myself.
going to get, that's why when we were initially talking about it, because their price is so much less than everybody else's,
Yes.
but in reality, when you look at this fee structure, it made it clear that their price is in fact pretty much the same as everybody else's.
When you add on all the other pieces.
When you add on the, advertisements and the background checks. But the one key piece that I would want, if we were going to approve this one, that we talked about specifically was the transition workshop. And Dr. Castrita specifically said that that would be part of this contract, of the existing contract, of the base fee. So I would want to approve any contract with them, including that, since that is not spelled out in this.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the last search, was there any issue that things were way beyond what was expected?
No.
No. Okay.
Yes, Simon.
And then I'll add that I think for whatever firm we choose, it is important that they make the recommended amendment that Mr. Herron brought up, which was the change in board majority language. I think that that's important to make sure that that is reflected, because I know that Mr. Herron asked that for every single firm, and every single firm, some more accepting than others, but they all agreed to make that change based on the comment.
Mr. Herron.
3 out of 4 agreed.
3 out of 4.
Three
There
out
was
of 4.
one did not. But it was not one of these two.
Okay. Never mind. 3 out of 4.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts? I mean, I feel, just to jump in here, like the rest of you, I am okay with either one. I see benefits to either of them. There's a great argument to be made about knowing someone and having that trust, and having had the 3 of you all having gone through that process and work with the same consultant is a comforting thought, because you know the person. I've worked with them through the board retreats that we've had, board workshops. So I feel comfortable in that regard. I know that, in the reference checks, both of them, at least for me, it seemed to come out really well. I mean, it is a toss-up in that regard. So, Mr. Herron.
One more thing. I was sort of surprised at the reaction of the two from leadership, that they weren't really aware that somebody else had been given the job and they got it at the last minute. They didn't come across as being familiar with they gave their presentation, but I didn't feel they were really came prepared to be, we are for Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody told them to come and make the presentation because somebody else couldn't be here. And it was sort of a surprise that the other two were even in the document from the response I got. So based upon that, if a motion's in order,
yes,
I will move that we contract with the firm of HYA for recruitment of a new superintendent.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Mr. Herron, second by Ms. Idelson. Any discussion? Yes.
May I ask the motion include that the contract be amended as regarding the board majority and the inclusion of a transition workshop as discussed?
Yes, Mr. Herron.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion with an amendment. Any other discussion, questions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion made by Mr. Herron, second by Ms. Idelson, passed 5-0. We now have a firm for our search. If you're out there, HYA, congratulations. We move on to the conference agenda, and the first item is discussion of agreement with Learning Ally, Incorp.
I will invite up Mike Sterling from the Special Education Department to talk about the program.
Oh, we have public comment.
We also have public comment for this too, so board, would you like to have public comment first, or hear? Yeah. Why don't you start off? Yeah.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Drotti. I'm here on behalf of Ms. Rodriguez, who's homesick. She apologizes that she could not be here today. In April, or I'm here tonight just basically to provide an update on our interactions with and our partnership with Learning Allies since April 2015, when, upon board approval, we were able to begin working with them. And then discuss and answer any questions related to the extension of that contract for an additional two school years starting about now. So in April 2015, when we entered into the partnership with them, we set about coordinating a variety of trainings for both our special education staff and general education staff. So we had one that occurred in June during our PD week, one that occurred in August during our PD day, a week-long intensive one that occurred between October and November. And in each of those, what we focused on was providing our teachers with dyslexia awareness, and then training on the functional aspects of the program, so enrolling students, getting books uploaded. Since that time, we've gotten 418 students enrolled in the program, and they've downloaded just north of 2,100 books. We're looking at this point to extend out that contract for an additional 2 years in order to provide additional training to both general education and special education teachers. Although at this time I can tell you that all but one of our special education teachers is trained. The one who's not is someone who just started up with Peabody Charter just recently in lieu of a retirement. We would be looking, we're not exactly sure on which teachers we would focus on. We've had discussions related to co-teachers or general education teachers with high concentrations of students with IEPs and 504 plans in their classes, but we haven't finalized anything yet. We would also like to focus more on parent outreach through the Parent Resource Center in this coming year, with at least 2, possibly 3 events that are co-coordinated between us and Learning Ally, where again we come out, we provide training on dyslexia awareness, more training on the program itself, and so that parents are able to assist their children within the home. Yeah, I believe that's as much as we've done thus far since April of last year, and kind of what our plan is going forward. And so if there are any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Darren. One thing we want to do is have a public comment, and then we'll come back to any questions that the board may have.
Certainly.
Thank you.
So we have Cherie Ray as a speaker.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about Learning Ally tonight. At one point, I have to say that I got my son through high school by reading to him. He has dyslexia, and he hated to read, basically. And I remember one time talking to him and saying, "Come on, Daniel, let's get this book out and let's read it." And he said, "How good could it be if it is stuck in a book?" And what Learning Ally does is take stories and remove them from books for kids who have difficulty with print. And the human voice that's used with Learning Ally is extremely important, because research shows that if children listen to a human voice rather than a synthetic one, it registers more and they hear it and they get it better. And Learning Ally has become so important that we now talk about ear reading. It's not just eye reading, and it's not just reading with fingers for Braille, but it's ear reading. Learning Ally is an incredibly comprehensive resource for our students, for our parents, and for our educators. And I'd suggest that anybody take a look at their website. It's amazing. And they frequently have free webinars and amazing services, and a number of videos that can really help kids who have learning disabilities feel better about themselves, because they can share it with others. The other thing that Learning Ally does is allows students to have the gift of time. They can listen where they might take forever to read. And it allows them to be engaged in print material and stay up with their friends, their peers, who might be like reading Harry Potter. If these kids can't read Harry Potter, they can listen to it, and they get the same benefit. And I'd just like to close with a couple things. I wish that I had had access to Learning Ally when my son was a student, and I've heard anecdotally from several parents and students who are being able to use it right now, and it's greatly beneficial to them. And I do think that the one thing that we could do is really kind of have the district toot its own horn a little bit about the fact that we have Learning Ally, and it's a big deal. It's an important project, and it really does help these kids who struggle to read. And it's not just special ed kids with IEPs, but also 504 kids. So it's really an important program, and I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Board questions? Mr. Herron.
I have a couple of questions. If you slide down to the very end of that document, I guess that's not the one, the one that has the costs in it. Okay, keep going, yeah. Okay, there you go. My question that I asked both Helen and Dr. Cash and was, even though the agenda item says the impact is $48,000, you can see by those numbers that that's assuming that the district will raise with the help of Learning Ally. Not Learning Ally with the help of the district, but the district with the help of Learning Ally, about another $81,000 on top of those, on top of what it says a fiscal impact. And so I asked the question is, who's responsible for raising that $81,000 to do this program? And the answer was, we'll solicit for funds. And if the end result is that we think the program is great, which I'm a fan of the program. I read every article on Facebook about Learning Ally, and they come in every day, and you read some of the stories, and they're fantastic. So I'm in favor of it. But basically the answer I got was that if we like it, if we can't raise the funds, if Learning Ally can't help us raise the funds, then we'll have to take it from district funds, which bothers me a little bit. But that brings me back to, now scroll back down to the, I'll tell you when to stop. Let's see. Keep going, I think. now we passed it, go back. Where's the section about?
Right, second to the last paragraph.
Second?
Yeah.
No, there's an
The end
agreement.
of page 2.
Page 2. You're right there. I said, this is a 2-year agreement. What if we don't like it after 1 year? And the answer I got was, well, we can give 30 days notice and stop it. But when I read that document, it says, if at the end of year 1, from April to 15th to December 15, either party fails to meet the standards as set forth in this agreement, and if notification, the time for correction has been offered, then the agreement may be terminated. Well, that is passed. That was December 31st, 15. It says nothing about year 2. So when it comes back, I would like to have that paragraph extended that, with the same wording, is just, if we decide after 1 year that it's just not feasible to raise that kind of money, and we don't want to spend that kind of money, or we don't think the program has done the results we want, that after the 2nd year, we can also cancel with notice and proper. Because I don't think that gives us any right to cancel in the 2 years.
Okay, sorry, I was just making a note
Yeah,
there
good.
for myself. So a couple of things that I'll address, and then obviously to your point about the dates being adjusted, I'll bring that back to Ms. Rodriguez first thing in the morning, and we'll discuss that with Andrew Friedman, who's the representative from Learning Ally, and make sure that that language is adjusted. Because I agree that the way that it's phrased, it sounds like that date is already passed, although he's given us both verbal confirmation that that would extend in each of the years. So we'll just make sure it's in writing as well. As far as the matching, or not the matching funds, but the fundraising is considered, I just would want to point out to the board and to Dr. Dradi and Dr. Ramirez that during year 1, they were able to meet their financial goals in relation to us.
How much was that?
I don't know off the top of my head, I'm sorry. I do know that they were able to meet it because we didn't have to exercise this clause. And it was something that we had talked about in one of our management meetings. So I'm going to take positive presupposition and assume that they will be able to meet those financial obligations.
You might want to have Ms. Rodriguez let us know what those numbers were.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure they're in the same ballpark.
Ms. Parker.
I'm also a supporter, but I would like to know, the collaborative goal for year 2 is for 750 students to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a maximum? I mean, do all students in the district have access to it, or is there a number limit?
There's no number limit. The way that Learning Ally was an organization that was previously under the title of the, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. It's the for the visually impaired and, thank you, Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic. Mm-hmm. Excellent public comment in that area. Anyways. So there are some parameters by which we have to operate, and a student has to have a print disability, an identified print disability. The number of students who have that, there is no cap. It's just going to be based on the students who are within our district at the time. I think 750 is just a reasonable number. We're already at 418. I would imagine that we will exceed that number, but that's not a cap for us in terms of the students that we're allowed to serve. Learning Ally allows us to offer it to any student who qualifies for it.
Great, that's good to know. And I guess my other just comment, and I appreciate Mr. Herron's concerns about the funding, and my concern is always that if this is something that's beneficial to our students, then we should be paying for it. And so I think it would be great if we had outside funding for it, but again, I think it's something that we need to evaluate over the next 2 years and decide if this is something that is fundamentally very good for our students, then we need to pay for it and not be seeking outside funding for it. So I just want to make sure that that's out there as well.
Mm-hmm. And just to circle back around to both yours and Mr. Herron's comments, I think one of the reasons that we discuss structuring it this way is it buys us some time to really evaluate the program, make sure that our teachers have bought into it, which I can speak anecdotally so far that every teacher that I've talked to who's gone through the training and who has then started to implement and use the program has had nothing but positive things to say about both. They've been both happy with the work that Learning Ally has done for them and how how their students are responding to the program. So everything at this point is indicating positive gains. And we, sorry, to circle back to the other piece about the financial aspect of it, we have had more than a few people approach us in terms of being willing to donate to us. I sat in a meeting with Ms. Ray and Ms. Rodriguez to discuss updates in relation to this program just a few months ago.
Ms. Limon.
Thank you. I have heard and read good things about the program, but you just mentioned something about the positive kind of outcomes. I was wondering if you can just speak a little bit to that, what we did see in year one, so that we at least know that this is consistent with what we've read and what we've heard.
So prior to April 2015, we had 25 students enrolled in the program, and that was typically through just individual IEP team decisions. We then actively engaged in a partnership, and that went up just within those short few months. And I would say that you can't even count April and May, because we kind of held off on allowing people to do it just so that we had time to train staff on it. So essentially from August through now, 388 students have enrolled in addition to the 25. So that's a substantial increase in terms of the number of students who are accessing the program. I have a report that I'm happy to provide that I get from them that can tell you the number of pages read on the program. But the number of books that have been downloaded and accessed is 2,100 a little over 2,100. And so that's, again, so now you're breaking it down by student. Each of our campuses has students who are actively enrolled in the program, so it's not like it's centralized in one place with just a few kids accessing it. It's quite a few books, quite a few pages being read, quite a few students.
Okay, so
and I would say in a short period of time.
So in a short period of time, we've seen an increase in the number of users, increase in the number of books downloaded and pages read.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ms. Eidelson.
And are they able to use Learning Ally independently at home and at any place, or is it specifically in the classroom?
So it's a web-based program. So ideally, it is designed to be used anywhere. At this point, from my knowledge, students are essentially using it within the classroom. So they are accessing it via computer or iPad that's within their realm at school. I can't speak to what is going on outside of school. But I think it's an excellent question and something that we could probe parents and teachers about.
Is it potentially available to them outside the classroom?
Again, once a student has an active account, they can access it anywhere that has a Wi-Fi connection.
Great, thank you.
I would just like to add that that after the first year, when we get to that point in time, that we asked Ms. Rodriguez if she can come back, or yourself, to talk to the board in terms of the implementation with the teachers, as you mentioned before. That's probably the piece that I'm more interested in. I see through the numbers that it's a successful program insofar as the students are concerned, but the teachers also have to be willing to implement and wanting to implement it. And by accounts, it sounds like it's going okay, but we should look at a year from now and find out how well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Mr. Herron.
I agree totally with Ms. Parker and the others, but in light of that, this should be an LCAP issue.
Yeah.
I mean, this is $81,000 in the next, starting now, in 2 years. I don't think it's in the LCAP for the rest of this school year, but starting July 1st, the LCAP, and that'd be for the next 18 months after that. That's what the LCAP process is for. And so I would think this should be not, hey, if we don't raise the money, then we'll just spend the district money. It should be money allocated by the district if we think it's that important. So I'd like that to be into the LCAP, at least thought about LCAP.
It will be.
Thank you, Mr. Jardy. Thank you, Mr. Stern.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now moving on to conference agenda item number 2, discussion of...
One second.
Yes, Mr. Herron.
Happy birthday, Sherry.
We are moving to item number 2, discussion of Dos Pueblos and San Marcos High School Program of Choice Reports for 2014-15.
Yes, as per Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 6181, Alternative Schools Programs of Choice, each district program of choice at Dos Pueblos High School and San Marcos have submitted their annual evaluation reports for 2014-15. And I'll invite the staffs of each school to come up one at a time, and we'll start with Dos Pueblos High School. Principal Sean Carey will be the lone representative for the high school to present on the programs for Engineering Academy and International Baccalaureate.
Good evening, members of the Cabinet and Board of Education. I'm very proud to present about the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy and the International Baccalaureate Program at Dos Pueblos High School. I believe you've been furnished these documents. Is that accurate? So I'll give you sort of an overview, and then I'll be available for any questions or any questions you might have, or any discussion you might want to have. The thing I would say that's notable in both these cases is just the timing of the evaluation reports is such that I want you to be mindful of the fact that even though we have some data here about academic year 15-16, that a lot of the narratives, a lot of the things that you'll see explained in subsequent sections of the report are describing things that were true of the programs in 14-15. So, for example, when we get down to the final section of this document that was prepared by Emily Shayer on behalf of the Engineering Academy, you'll see an action plan that in fact is in effect currently. The kinds of things that we had planned to do in 14-15, we are now underway and in the process of actually doing in school year 15-16. So please just sort of be mindful of that. I know that as we reviewed this as internally as a team, that there was a little bit of a sort of time lapse there for us. I wanted to just highlight that. You'll notice there we have data on total enrollments. It would be very helpful, we believe, to see this disaggregated by grade level. I think it's noteworthy to pause here and recall that the Engineering Academy was initially 30 students in their senior year, and the span of the last 4 years has expanded by a factor of 12 because it's 3 times that in all 4 grade levels. So the capacity of the Engineering Academy has really grown substantially in a short time. And we know from tracking the demographics that while it's clear that there is demographic disproportionality across lots of categories, we see that disproportionality lessening over time as you look at the different grade level cohorts. So this data is not disaggregated by grade level, and I wanted to highlight that. You'll see there some information about recruitment practices. Brian's helping. Thank you, Brian. And I also want to highlight here just something new for us, which is number 10. We did a lot to try to expand the audiences that we typically do outreach for, specifically to monolingual Spanish-speaking families, and also with an emphasis on reaching out to families sort of who are at earlier grades in our pipeline. We are just finding that junior high was too late, really, to be planting the notion of interest in the Engineering Academy in students and in families' minds, in part due to the rigor, in whole, due to the rigor of the courses, even in the 9th grade level. And so through a combination of efforts, we, in this last year, have gone a long way to having meaningful outreach into the earlier grades, which for us, of course, in Goleta means working with GUSD and our feeder school pattern there. You'll see that described in number 10. And also in SBUSD. We found that it was more helpful for us, particularly with monolingual Spanish-speaking families, to actually go to their elementary school settings as opposed to having them come to our setting, which is not to say that our open houses aren't very successful, because that's where you really appreciate the facility that we use and the projects. But for this kind of preliminary outreach, that's something that we piloted this school year that went very well with they're specific to Brandon and Monroe and their science nights. You'll see there the review of the funding sources. We noted that last year the board enjoyed seeing reports of different post-secondary institutions that students attended after experiencing the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy. You'll see commentary in subsequent sections about extracurricular activities. We think it's notable that DPA students are in I'm way down, sorry, Brian. We think it's notable that students from the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy are disproportionately represented in programs like school leadership and class leadership. And we know that part of that is because students until their senior year are just taking one class within the Engineering Academy. So even though it's a very robust program of study, it's not, it definitely constitutes a kind of school community within a school, but recall that most freshmen, sophomores, and juniors are having 5 classes of their day not in the Engineering Academy. So there's broad access to all the different extracurricular programs and other courses and academic pathways at DP. Less so in the senior year with the capstone project, but up until the senior year, that's the case. You'll see there are community partnerships, which are many.
We have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I just had a question on the funding piece. As far as, I know there was a major change from the robotics emphasis to the mechatronics last year. And did that change the funding requirement? Because as far as the expense of the robotics competition and travel and all that.
I don't think that substantively changed the sort of the budget for the Engineering Academy. It continues, the revenue that we need to generate annually continues to sort of gradually increase incrementally, but those costs, given the total operating budget of the Engineering Academy, were not significant.
Okay, thanks.
We'll go down to accomplishments and successes, and there was, we're delighted to have a lot of public attention around the Carousel of Physics, which of course is a very innovative end product and something that really spoke to not just the traditional STEM folks and industries, but also through the art component, and particularly because it was featured at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. The interest in the DPA and in that capstone project really took off in ways that really transcended what our expectations were, and demand for seeing that and experiencing the Carousel of Physics was more than we had anticipated, which was a good problem to have. And then you'll see there, as I had mentioned earlier, that when it says future development goals, those were the future development goals in 2014-15, meaning these are the things that we are working on now, these final 8 things in this final section. So I hope that was a efficient and succinct but helpful overview. I don't know if you have questions for me about this particular program of choice report.
No, I want to thank you for your comments. I know there's a question from Ms. Parker.
Yeah, and we'll look at all of these kind of as a whole as well. Obviously, we've all looked at IB, and so I'm kind of comparing and contrasting enrollment in particular, and as you talked about the disproportionality. And I'm curious because, if your numbers were going up every year and staying up every year, then I would think that your overall numbers would change. And so the question then in my mind is, are you having students of color drop out of the Engineering Academy at a higher rate?
Yeah, I'm not sure about at a higher rate. The unfortunate situation when you have a smaller representative sample is that if you have even 2 or 3 students of color who decline to continue participating in the academy, that has a significant proportionate effect on the percentages. So when we reviewed this internally as a team, we talked a lot about the anecdotes surrounding the stories. Something that happened this past year, we admitted 25 students of color in our incoming freshman class, but multiple students after being admitted decided not to attend Dos Pueblos High School, typically for reasons of sort of family legacy and typically in order to attend Santa Barbara High School. So that was something sort of new for us. We admitted more. We had, I would say, 2 things about that as far as this most recent incoming class, the 9th grade class. We had a much stronger applicant pool in terms of students of color than we've ever had. There have been years, and this goes to the comment I made earlier about just sort of junior high being too late a time to start, letting students know and families know what they need to be in a good position to apply to the Engineering Academy. In past years, it was a real challenge for us to find, even across the 4 junior highs, a proportionate number of applicants that would allow us to help chip away at and make significant change at, and do more than chip away at the disproportionality. So this year we had the strongest applicant pool for students of color. We admitted a quarter of the incoming class was students of color, which is much more than 16 or 17%. But we had that happen. We had several students, we had 3 students from the junior to senior year not continue at that point. When we do exit interviews with all students who decline to continue participating. In that particular case, those 3 students were very clear that it was not a desire to not participate specifically in mechatronics, because we were mindful of that with the switch from the robotics capstone to the mechatronics carousel of physics capstone. In that particular case, and with that transition, you might recall that there were letters and lots of meetings that took place with families where we espoused sort of the benefits of reflecting on work-life balance and on sustainability and things like that. And it was actually in response to those kinds of tenets that these students and their families said, but I'm not really at a place with my career goals where I want my senior year to be 2 or 3 classes of mechatronics, given what I want to do immediately following high school. I don't plan to pursue engineering, which we see as plenty okay. I think you're familiar enough with Engineering Academy to know it's far less about engineering, and that engineering is really just the means to experience a whole new way of learning. So we had a lot of anecdotal evidence around that. And we just see that as something that will sort of, as it builds critical mass, will kind of continue to spiral upward. It's something we're certainly very, very mindful of, and something that the Engineering Academy is interested in really looking at the long arc of with those kind of pipeline issues I've addressed.
Fundamentally, is your applicant pool reflecting the demographics of the district at this point?
Our applicant pool is not reflecting the demographics of the district.
Okay, and you, for the DPEA in particular, I know it's looking at grades and test scores. Is there an essay and interview as part of that process?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to actually, in particular, commend you about going out and looking for another way to outreach to students and actually taking it to them and not waiting for them to come to you. I've been to the open houses that the Engineering Academy has done, and they're always well attended. I've seen a lot of Latino families going through it, and and I think that's wonderful, and it speaks to the desire to be as equitable as possible. But going out and actually looking to outreach at an earlier age, and specifically going out to schools is a really great thing. So I commend you for doing that. Thank you. Can go on to the next one.
Okay. Okay, so here we have the Program of Choice report for the International Baccalaureate Program. Just a review for everyone is that this is a program that that students can access in their junior and senior years. It's not something that they do from ninth grade, coming into ninth grade or in 10th grade. It's a 2-year diploma program. When we think about it, I also want to clarify that there is the full diploma program, and we have in a typical year about 20 students who will pursue the full diploma. That is, I would argue probably the most intensive experience that you can have as a high school student in terms of the rigor, but that a lot of these numbers, when you see this 253 and 273, we're talking about there are students who are taking multiple IB classes. You can take them a la carte, you can take them for certificate, and it's also inclusive of the full diploma, the students who are pursuing the full IB diploma. So here's the demographic data there. You can see that we are seeing it trend in the way that we want to see it trend, incrementally, and we hope and look forward to building on that in subsequent semesters and years. You see here a narrative about the recruitment practices. I'll just say that our IB coordinator, Matt Moran, who couldn't be here tonight for family reasons, is in his 2nd year as the coordinator. He's been very aggressive at sort of overhauling what IB IB's public image is, and the just sort of PR dimensions of IB. He's working with the Santa Barbara Ed Foundation. He's working with our newly launched school foundation, because he's sort of getting off the ground with IB at the same time our school-based foundation is doing that. So they have become partners, and in fact both attended the same meeting today. So that's something that Matt is very mindful of. We do have an IB visit, the same way that schools are visited for WASC or for audits. The IBO, the International Baccalaureate Organization, is visiting our school March 7th through 9th, so we've had to complete a self-study, as one does with WASC, in the same year that we're doing WASC. And so that's a fairly robust document also, and being audited. So it's just a good year for just examining our school top to bottom. So that's been healthy for us, because we've been reflecting on a lot of these things in a really kind of revived kind of way in this last year. Funding for IB remains a challenge. IB is not an inexpensive program. And it's something that continues to challenge us, particularly when you compare it with the costs of, say, a comparable experience for a student who might be taking 5 or 6 AP classes in our school, the test fees and things like that, the training fees. It seems like just all the fees associated with IB are more. Of course, we also believe that the IB package delivers a lot more than students who just take the most rigorous classes kind of as a standalone course of study. As I said, Matt's doing a lot of work on the kind of the development end to try to offset and mitigate some of those costs to the students and families. There we have our academic data. I think it's worth noting that for some of these classes, there may just be, like an example of Latin SL, there were only 3 students who took that exam. So we had 1 who did a really outstanding job and 2 who did not. So those numbers are sometimes based on really small sample sizes, but we had an 88% pass rate, and in the most part have average scores either match or beat the world scores. There we see, actually, one of the things I think is most important about IB, I'm under extracurricular, but often overlooked and sort of undersold, which are the learner outcomes. I think these are just really exciting because they have a lot to do. They remind me of reading things that we read about with Common Core standards. They remind me of the things we talk about in terms of PLCs and how they work together and how we integrate technology. So these are just exciting learning outcomes that I think we could be doing a lot more when it comes to the PR and having people understand sort of what IB's brand is and what it aims to do. And I'll also note there, I know that's come before the board, and we appreciate your support for the service trip, the international service trip to Vietnam. That will be an exciting new chapter for our IB program. That's under community partnerships, as well as there we have some accomplishments and successes. And that was, again, remember the time lapse and kind of put yourself back a few months. And here we have at the last section the future development goals for IB. And you see a bulleted list there.
Any questions, board? Ms. Parker.
So International Baccalaureate is not, it's selective in the sense that it's meant for students that can handle the academic rigor, but it doesn't do interviews, it doesn't do essays to get into those classes, because anybody can, right?
Yes, it's open access. Yeah. We do have an application process that's really more of a, are you a fit for us? Are we a fit for you? We want to make sure you understand what's involved here in terms of the full diploma. Right. And if you're taking a single IB course, it's just like taking an AP course or an honors level course. Students who are interested in the full diploma go through an application process that is not selective in the sense that it doesn't exclude anyone.
And the full diploma application, does it have an interview?
It does. Well, I can't speak to that definitively. We used to do that, but it's not a formal interview with a panel. It's more of a counselor check-in. We have a counselor who's dedicated to serving the IB program, so that person typically meets with the student and their family.
Sits down. What are the current demographics this year at Dos Pueblos? How many Latino students do you have?
So we're about 45% Latino, okay, and about 44% white.
A lot more diverse than when I was there. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, literally, when I was there in '86, you can count the number of Latino students over there.
Right. So that's, I mean, for us, it makes for a very healthy, school culture, and
yeah. It's great. Any other questions on the board? Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you. I
Clary.
appreciate your time
appreciate
and
it.
attention.
Thank you.
And support.
Likewise.
So next up we have is San Marcos High School, and let's start with the Apple program. And I don't know, Mrs. Behrens, are you coming up with Mr. Nielsen or is he? We'll start with Mr. Nielsen then.
Well, thank you. Let me try to adjust this. Thank you for having me today. It's always a pleasure on an annual basis to report to the board about the Apple Academy now in its 6th year. So I'm very proud of that. Each year I start off by saying I'm a product of the Santa Barbara Unified School District and the Goleta Unified School District. I went to El Camino and Mountain View and La Colina and San Marcos. So I have 2 daughters now at Peabody Elementary School, so I'm all in with regards to the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and I've been employed by the district for now 18 years, which is amazing to me that time flies that fast. With regards to the Academy, we continue our mission of offering a very rigorous 4-year academic pathway that prepares students for top-tier 4-year institutions, by also simultaneously providing students with strong involvement now in leadership and service-based opportunities. We have an academy now that not only benefits the students through leadership and service development, but also the community in a lot of different ways. And over the last 6 years, we've developed a number of programs that have been really successful to date and are now expanding. You have the board report in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions with regard to our demographics and our slow but sure progress upward for underrepresented students in the academy. And some of the different things that we did this last year. Again, this report goes to 14-15. But I did want to kind of just highlight a few different things that the Apple Academy celebrates. Our students are doing really, really well. They are asked to take a minimum of 8 advanced placement courses. Most of our students are taking upwards of 12 and 14 advanced placement classes through the 4 years. Their average GPA, 14-15, as you see, was a 4.4 academy-wide. Seniors, 4.5. Great success in 2015 in the admissions process. 2014 was a year that kind of was a test year as far as outcomes, as whether or not this academic pathway would, and the focus on particular enrichment opportunities and leadership and service would impact the college admissions process. And thankfully it did. We had some great outcomes there, and then in 2015 I think we surpassed some of the outcomes there as well. As you can see, 12 Berkeleys out of 30 students, 10 UCLAs, Harvard, Dartmouth, Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, 12 UCSBs. You got to throw in UCSB in there, right? Vanderbilt, Yale. So one of the things that I'm really proud of is that, excuse me, is the merit-based scholarships that were offered to students. So as students were applying to some of these private institutions, the private institutions would come back with offers of merit-based scholarship, and it's an aggregate number. It's all of the schools private schools that accepted these students, but the dollar amount was about $1.7 million, which is a lot for 33 students. So I'm very proud of that. Our scholarship, we had a national merit finalist last year in Oliver Pilch. He was also named one of 100 students out of 100,000 applicants that was awarded the Coca-Cola scholarship. We had a student of the Entrepreneur of the Year voted by the Goleta Chamber of Commerce. We had 2 national merit Hispanic scholars, 9 of 11 National Merit finalists were Apple Academy students in that junior class. Students are performing well in science competitions, both locally and statewide. And then we've done a really good job, I think, of integrating leadership into the actual cohort classroom environment as well. So each student takes a cohort class that's either in English, science. At this point here in 2014-15, there was a math class. And then history classes as well. And so our goal there is to integrate leadership, enrichment opportunities, and curriculum into those classes that focus on particular traits and attributes that we've identified for leadership development. We have great community partnerships. We're developing those. The Mosher Foundation is probably our biggest supporter, but we've expanded a bit to the Alice Tweed Toohey Foundation, partnerships with the Bank of Santa Barbara, Deckers Corporation, and the Habit as well, restaurant chain. Our programmatic accomplishments, we developed a cyber tutorial program pilot about a year and a half ago. And last year, it really kind of hit its stride. We developed a website-based platform that where students come in during our royal time and our lunch period once a week. There's 4 days a week. They tutor kids at El Camino Elementary School in math. And in reading comprehension over a kind of a Skype-based platform that we're using, and that's had some great outcomes and great successes. A program that we piloted last year was our senior tech. A senior living community tech tutor program. So we went to Valverde Senior Living Community and offered to tutor seniors in the use of technology. It was a really successful program. It was featured on KEYT. And just a quick story about some of those outcomes. We had a student working with one of the residents there. And the resident didn't know how to accept a friend on Facebook. So she had a Facebook account, but didn't know just to click the button and you would have your friends, So the student said, here's what you do. And literally in that, 30 minutes, she started, making connections with friends that she's had, for many, many years. So that program turned out to be a unique program in that not only were the students helping the seniors, but the seniors were very interested in our students. And so we had, former professors at UCSB and attorneys and what have you, asking a lot of questions about, where they are, why they're in a leadership-based academy, and taking a strong interest in them. So we decided it was such a success that we continue to offer that on a monthly basis, and then now are attempting to expand it to the San Marcan. They have a new computer lab there, so we're working on that. So those are newer highlights for the academy. I guess at this point I will actually I wanted to mention one thing. One outcome for the academy that was a surprise to me is that we're offering leadership and service-based opportunities. We have a leadership council, and we have 15 student-run committees and 15 parent-run support committees. But one of the incredible outcomes in my experience has been that not only are these students participating in programs that Apple has built, but there's kind of a derivative outcome or a peripheral kind of outcome as well. They're starting to find their passion areas in certain things and going out and starting their own programs out in the community. We had a student that started a nonprofit organization to support children with autism. Recently, I think we had a couple kids come to the board. I think the Fay brothers came and developing a website so that they can connect the greater all students in the district via community service. So we're starting to see students take hold of their passions and really give back to the community, which is an amazing outcome, I think, for both the students, the community, and the academy. Any questions?
Board, any questions? Ms. Parker.
I think the students are doing great work and the teachers that support them, so thank you. And it's weird to think that it's seriously been 6 years.
I know.
Wow, okay. Again, we always circle back to access and making sure that we have barriers removed and that our special programs are reflective of our district demographics. One question I have for you is, for your application process, there's an essay. Do you do an interview, or is it just an essay along with grades and so forth?
So we have 2 essays. We have grades. We have them list extracurricular involvement. We're really trying to kind of move in the direction of making sure students are interested in developing leadership skills and becoming leaders both on the campus and in the community. So we're trying to get that out of the application as well. And then there's 2 letters of recommendation that the students have, no interview.
And another quick question, San Marcos has the PEAK program. Has there been any discussion of bringing a PEAK group into Apple?
No, not to date. One of the challenges, with Apple has been, I don't know if it's Apple, but one of the challenges has been the number of programs and competing for students. So whether it's the AVID, AVID group, there's some high achieving AVID students that fit great within Apple as far as the rigor and being able to perform academically, in the rigorous pathway and what have you. But those are also all-star AVID students as well, and they benefit the AVID group as well. So it's it can be a challenge offering the academy, offering a number of different programs for students, and yet we have people that are very involved in those academies or those different programs that want those students in their academies. So we're kind of fighting over some of the students. But to answer your original question, no. I'm interested to hear your idea on how that might happen.
Mr. Herron.
I know firsthand about the program. What I see as something so important is just family engagement. And you said 15 parent-run committees and 15 student-run committees, and I'm sure they all interact with each other. And if that concept could go throughout the district, not just with a specific program, but just in general, parents have to be involved, and I see it happening. The leadership aspect, I watched a city council meeting where a lot of your young people make presentations to be on a youth task force. And to watch them give these talks and the expression they had and the vitality they showed comes from someplace, and it has to be something you're training and working on very hard. And then when I see them going off early in the morning to mentor at elementary school, I mean, it's amazing to see these kids so busy and so intent and loving it so much. So you're doing a great job. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And I hear all sorts of good comments about you. I mean, you obviously are a great leader, and the students really respond to that.
Thank you.
Ms. Edelson.
I had a question on the application as far as how many students apply. Well, 2 questions. How many, what's your yield as far as how many apply and how many do you admit, and is there a waiting list? And I'm always hearing students say, I want to do this program, but feeling like they're not going to get in, or that sort of stress of all that. And then I wanted to know the demographics of the school as far as Hispanic to white students and the socioeconomically disadvantaged, just so I can make sense of, are you meeting the needs of the school?
The first question, there is a lot of hype out there that, I even hear, there's going to be 500 people applying and only 4 get in. And it's just not the case. We have about, on average, now that it's fully realized, it's about 100 students that apply, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more. 33 students get in their freshman year. So it's about 33% that get accepted to the academy.
And do they need to be already a San Marcos transfer student, or in that attendance area to apply, or can they apply from, say, living somewhere outside the attendance area, and then if they get in, attend San Marcos?
Yeah, so we encourage students that are interested in the academy that are outside the attendance area to fill out the district form, the district transfer form. And we've worked with administration and district administration to make sure that we are open to all students that want to apply to the academy. So that hasn't been a problem with us. There has been some issues with, student gets into the Apple Academy, also applies to the Engineering Academy, but I think it's just reflective of what we're doing here in the Santa Barbara Unified School District. I mean, as a parent, to have programs like this, or I don't know if you visited the District Academy Showcase the other night. We had a great turnout. Barbara Chiani should be commended for her efforts on that, and it just really, I think in talking to families, I think they feel very fortunate and grateful for the efforts of the entire district with regards to offering programs like the different academies that we're offering. Your second question to demographics of the school, and I'm going to kind of defer to Ed because I will say 52%. Is that
approximately 52% Latino, 40% white, and then the remainder is mixed. So approximately 52% Latino student body at San Marcos, 40% white, and then the remainder is a mixture.
And then the other one was the socioeconomic.
I believe we're under 50%, but probably in the 40% range for socioeconomically disadvantaged.
Okay.
No questions? Any other questions? I just want to thank you both. And we'll go on to the Entrepreneurship Academy.
Mr. Alex Sheldon.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'll try to be brief with my comments on the report. This is a really exciting time for us in the Entrepreneurship Academy because this is our first our first graduating class will be graduating this June, and it's a particularly exciting time of year right now because we're just starting on our final capstone project for the Academy, and we just finished one of the senior capstone projects. The seniors have done 2 years of coursework, and the report essentially reflects that because the report focuses on last year. But leading up to this year, participating in Kids Helping Kids, and there's about 150 students who participate in that. 30 of them are from our academy, but they had a really successful year with a terrific two-night concert, and they raised, I believe, $471,000 to help disadvantaged youth here and around the world. So that was really exciting for us. Our seniors participated in that. The CEO of the nonprofit was one of our academy students. And like I said, now we're moving on to the final capstone project, which is the seniors are creating their business plans and getting ready to prepare to enter them in the Scheinfeld Center New Venture Challenge at Santa Barbara City College. So the kind of some of the activities we've done that I'm really proud of is some of the relationships we've been able to develop with some larger corporations. We visited a marketing agency, 160over90. Last year, we've been able to work with Nike, Beats by Dre, Oakley, and then locally in town, Deckers has done a lot of work with our students. We developed a project called the Business Strategy Project, where we paired our sophomores and juniors with local businesses, and it kind of revolved around their coursework. They developed strategy plans for those local businesses. Sophomores taking social media marketing classes, developed a social media marketing plan. The juniors who were learning the aspects of writing a business plan kind of did a deep dive into the business and then helped them with some strategy. We have had our parents' involvement increase a lot. We have some parent project committees that we've created, and they have done a lot of stuff for us. One of the things that's very visible that they've done is we have a monthly speaker series where we have lunch for all our students, and we have a local entrepreneur who comes in and talks and interacts with our students. And the last thing that kind of we're working towards this year, and we'll kind of see the results of our kind of the work we've done, is our mission statement's really focused on helping students to pursue a business-related college degree or start their own business, and we're going to kind of see the results of that in our seniors. We have a lot of them who are applying to colleges who are focusing on business-related college degrees, so I'm very excited about that. Right now with recruitment, we recruit our students from San Marcos, 9th grade students, because the academy starts in the 10th grade, and we are working right now. I go into all the health classes, freshman health classes. I go into all the freshman AVID classes, and I also have teachers recommend students, and I query students based on GPA, and I meet with them individually who have expressed interest in the academy. And the application process for us is the entire month of February, and we're looking to, as always, we're looking for a diverse group of students to join our academy. We take 35 students each year. So I welcome any of your questions about the report.
Ms. Parker.
It's nice to see it developing the way that it is, so congratulations. Really an interesting academy idea. Of course, I'm going to ask the question about your application process, essays, interview, what do you do?
We have an application that has, I wouldn't call them essays because they're not long, but short questions. We're trying to find the students' essentially interest in our mission statement, pursuing a business-related college degree or starting a business. After we review all the applications, we then have a process where we conduct interviews for students.
So you do have an interview process?
Yes.
Thank you.
Board, any other questions? Ms. Idelson.
And also, a repeat question, about how many students do you turn away? You say you admit about 35. How many applicants generally?
In the first year, I believe we had in the 50s, and then the second year went up to 65. Last year we had over 80. So it's gone up each year. I don't know when that's going to stop. So I guess I'll find out this year. But last year we had in the 80s.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the final one is the health academies.
Yes, Mrs. Marcine Newman will present.
Thank you.
So good evening, you guys. Thanks for having us come in and talk about our special programs. It's always nice to share the things that we're doing. As you can see, my demographics are fairly consistent. We really try to get as diverse as possible. We usually have about 70 applicants, and we take 35 each year. My recruitment practices are very similar to Alex's in the sense that we start in 10th grade. So I recruit from the 9th grade class. I also go into the health science classes. I also go into the AVID classes. I think what's really helped is that the district has sponsored the Academy Showcases the past couple years, and so that really is a great community outreach for all of us. And I have noticed that we've had significant increases in student shadowing after the Academy Showcase event, so it's been great. And so we'll have 8th grade and potentially 9th grade students that'll come in and shadow. Sometimes they'll see multiple programs. Sometimes they'll come see Apple, they'll come see Health Academy, and they'll also come see entrepreneurship. Just as Eric said, I recommend that any parents and students that are interested in potentially coming to the Health Academy to apply for that interdistrict transfer within that time window, so they do have that choice. The other thing that I find really helpful is we host blood drives at the school through our HOSA club. We have a Health Occupation Students of America club, so that kind of gets the word out. We also have advisory committees, and so we have business professionals within the healthcare community that come in, and that also helps with recruitment practices. Some of our academic data, we've had 100% pass rate in our CNA exam, so we've so far had 199 students that have gone through the Certified Nursing Assistant program at City College. We've had a 100% pass rate, but we had 2 students that opted out to not take the exam. And this was quite a few years ago before we actually tracked who was taking the exam and who wasn't taking the exam. To get into the academy, the students there's an application process. It's a short answer type of application process. I then screen all of those applicants. The students need to have at least a 3.0. They also really need to have strong attendance. That's kind of the primary thing we look at. If there's a student on there that is struggling academically, oftentimes I'll call that student in to kind of try to figure out what's happening with them academically. After that process, I sit down with the other Health Academy teachers, and we screen all the applicants based on their application, GPA, that kind of stuff, and then we'll select the 35 students. We then have a wait list. At that point, I send a letter home to the students who were selected. The students who were not selected, they have to sign somewhat of a contract, just stating that they're still interested in the academy. They're able to prioritize their schedule so they'll be able to take Health Academy classes. So once in a while, we'll have a student that is unable to make that commitment. But usually, once we have the class selected, it pretty much stays consistent. Some of our other extracurricular activities that we do, besides our CTSO, is every year we have more students that participate in the community emergency response training that the fire department offers out at UCSB. So that's a really fun opportunity for the students, and they can also get community service. We have a lot of community partnerships, but our two primary community partnerships that we've had from day one are Cottage Health Systems. They're amazing. They provide us internship support and placements for all of our seniors. Our nursing students go through a really comprehensive internship down at Cottage after they earn their CNA license. They also supply us equipment as needed. Many of you have come and seen the health technologies facility over there, and they've supplied like the patient care beds. They help us with mannequins. And then they also supply us with professional speakers within the healthcare community. So we have a broad range of doctors, nurses, behind the scenes, people that work in healthcare that come in through our classes. And just some of our, other accomplishments. We've had 388 students that have graduated through the academy. We're one of the oldest academies, so this is our 14th year. And it's been a lot of fun. The latest thing that we added is last spring we added AP Psychology, so our students can now take psychology, college prep psychology, or they can also take AP Psychology. And if you have any other questions, I'd love to answer them.
Board, any questions? Mr. Herron.
Not a question, just a comment. At the showcase, I talked to 3 of your students, and I asked them, do they go to the Samarkand Health Center? And all 3 said, yeah, we were just there. Mm-hmm. But the interesting comment was they learned so much from the seniors. They learn more from the seniors than they learn from doing what they're doing. But they just love talking to the senior people there. They have wonderful questions, wonderful discussions, and they really enjoy it. You can tell by the look on their face.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah. They see a lot of, it's neat. They share those stories with me.
Ms. Parker.
Thank you. I think you've listened to all of our questions and incorporated it in what you had to say, but just one thing is that your program, although it's not listed here, has in the past tended to skew by gender and disproportionately female. And so I'm wondering if you're seeing any movement in that area or if that is still a trend.
That's a really good question. It still is a trend. We definitely have more female students than male students, but I think every year we have a little bit more male students. But it's still, I would say, out of the 100 students, we probably, I'd say 20 to 25% are male. So we still are very weak in the male component. We have, with Ed Barron's support, we've been really building our pre-med pathway in addition to our nursing pathway. And I think that is why we really had the history with the female students, just because of the history with nursing being primarily a female oriented career. But it's interesting, I have advisory committee meetings with the nursing colleagues at City College, and they have a male nursing little group, and so I'm going to try to incorporate the male nursing group. They have just, it's just like a club, and they really want to come into the Health Academy and talk to the kids. But I think just incorporating the pre-med pathway too, and some rigorous courses like the AP Psychology, the kinesiology, I think that's helping, but it's slow.
Sounds like you might need them to actually come with you to the health classes instead of just to the ones that are already there.
Right.
But that would be good.
It's true.
Board, any other questions? If not, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. So with that, we move on to...
Sorry, I just have some broader, not about a specific one, but some comments just about the broader...
Sure, go ahead.
This is, I think, my sixth, I was counting, I was like, this is my sixth presentation, annual presentation from the academies. And I have to commend the format. I think there's more consistency this year than there has been in some of the past years as far as how we're looking and collecting the information. And it's useful for us because I think it helps us compare in a little bit a different but more equitable way. So I appreciate the new format that has changed over the years, but even just from last year to this year. I know that in the 6 years we've talked a lot about the application process, and I know that the academies and programs have adapted it and have actually incorporated board and district feedback in looking at their application process. The showcase is something new. It was referenced multiple times. I do want to make a note, though, that while I did not attend this year's showcase, I've attended past showcases, but we have some work to do. It's not actually a diverse showcase in the sense of the folks who come to that. I think our district has, every academy has students who are there who are bilingual, who are really like the stars of getting the information out, and I think that that's really great and useful. But I want the showcase to continue, but I want to be mindful of the fact that those that attend aren't reflective of the school community. So I think that there's some work to do there. I know that this year the time changed. I don't know how we think about the fact, did the time change help or hurt? I know that I have seen very slow but some steady increases on the ethnicity side. The side I haven't seen gains on is the socioeconomic side, and I think that's a harder one to tackle. But I think of, well, did the time have something to do with it? If folks are working multiple jobs, and transportation's an issue, how do we think about that? So I'd like us to continue to find ways to refine our Showcase Academy. AVID has been a very strong program in our district, and I don't know if there is a way for these academies not to compete with AVID. And I think it would take creativity, because I also know that we're likely not in a place as a school district to think about, and I may be wrong, but to finance an extra period, right? That makes it difficult. When I was in school here, there were 7 periods, not 6 periods, and the extra period was an 8th period. So that changes the classes that you can take. An English learner will never be able to participate in these programs because they don't have an extra period. Their periods are assigned and taken. So I don't know if there's ways district-wide to think creatively about this, but I think that's important to consider. And it is hard, though, I think, that every year there are questions about access and what do we do. And I know that, I want to be sure that we're all clear, that we're all on the same team on this issue, because I have watched the academies take our feedback, incorporate it, and do what's possible. I also work, for a university system that has teams of people trying to address this, and we still struggle even at the university system to find ways to make our application pool look and reflect like California. And I know we don't even have the means in this district to do what I feel like some of the larger systems that are struggling with these really difficult issues. So I just, I didn't want to address it to just one. I think there's still big areas where we can improve, but I am open as a school board member to also hearing, what it is we need to think about. I don't want to just hear myself talk, over and over and over, as opposed to, are there things that can come forward that are board policy issues, that are something that we can do to help? I think that the students who go through these programs, tend to speak highly of these programs. And I want good programs replicated, not eliminated. And so I just, I open it up to the district, to administrators, to help us think about, is there something in our board policy that would be helpful? And so that's kind of where I'm at. I appreciate the, folks coming forward. I feel like I get it. I've had to give presentations and be on the other side of like, oh, here we go again. This is a tough year, and everybody knows what the elephant in the room is, right? And what's going to come up. But I think it's the willingness for us to tackle the elephant in the room that I'm looking for, as opposed to just, ignoring the elephant. Like we're working on this. We're all on the same team. We're working on this, and we know that this is an issue, but I want to talk about it. So thank you all for your time. And so those are just my general comments.
Ms. Parker.
And following up on that, I do think at this point, after having listened to this for many, many years, and obviously we still have other district programs of choice that will be coming to us, that we do need to take a look at AR 6181 and the enrollment piece in particular, which is on page 2. We have a very basic generic enrollment that we address about not being non-discriminatory and things like that. Larger districts have a much more standardized expectation of how students apply to selective programs, instead of having what we have, which is each individual school has decided, or each individual program has decided how they're going to do it, and they're all doing it differently. And obviously they each have unique pieces to them, but there are likely unintentional barriers there that it probably would be simple to remove if we talked it through and actually talked to students about why they're not applying. And what really is necessary for a program to be successful in terms of how they admit students, and what they've put in place that just unintentionally means students won't come. And so I think it's important for district admin and school staff to have that discussion around AR 6181, and then for that to come back to us, because I think that we, at this point, need to make some changes and make them at the district level.
I just want to add that I think it's one thing is to kind of look at the individual programs and kind of begin to address how they are reflective of our student population. And then there's the other thing that I see sort of reflected also. It's not necessarily just the practices of programs, but it's we look at our LCAP, and one of the LCAP goals is looking at parent engagement and outreach. And I look at it as also an issue of how we engage our parents and our community in terms of knowledge and sort of privileged knowledge, really, because oftentimes it's Principal Carey was speaking to it of finding out that by the time they hit high school, it's too late. And a lot of the outreach should be a little earlier, should be at the elementary school level, of knowing that pathway. I know the last time we had these presentations, and Amir was here and did his presentation. I know he and I did a little bit of an exchange about looking at how early we want to go out and outreach to communities. But it really is that. It's also that whole piece, that some of us know how to get to certain places and how to go about getting there in a way that's the most efficient, cost-effective, and some of us don't. And that's known to some folks in the community, and some people don't know that. And it's not to put the blame on some and not to excuse others, but it's just to acknowledge that and recognize that. And we as a district have an opportunity, and we have opportunities not only through board policies, but also when we look at our LCAP and start looking at where are those pieces that we could do more outreach to inform parents, to get at parents at an earlier point in time. And that's part of the puzzle too here. And it's not just the academies that have that sole responsibility, although we are talking about them this evening. But I look at it beyond that. So I wanted to mention that. Ms. Eidelson.
I have a question for Dr. Durrati. I know that a lot of work is going into handbook and,
Yeah.
Online, and will that have a component to this of, mapping out that pathway for a student coming in, at an earlier age?
Absolutely. So starting this year, as students enroll into courses, they'll either be on an A through G track or some kind of CTE or academy track, and they'll know that from 7th grade on. So that is what will be different this year than previous years, and our course catalog is described in that way, and it'll be electronic for everybody to see.
Okay, and so that'll be full access
Absolutely.
to anybody looking at the district
Yeah.
and course selection?
Yeah.
And will there be some way that, say, a student, I think the academies are so intriguing in many ways because there's an opportunity cost when a student takes, say, a course that is, say, the health academy, and maybe by doing that, they're letting go of a different track or different courses that might qualify them for colleges in a different way. And I think that is important and a very
Absolutely.
important piece to that.
Absolutely. So what you'll see in most of these academies or CTE programs is that the capstone courses will be specific to those programs, but the general courses they will take will be the regular A through G courses that students are supposed to take.
Good.
One of the issues that has always been sort of under the table, you might say, when you look at our donation list, every board meeting practically, the amount of money that parents have to put up for sports of all nature, for arts, for music, for academies, they're expensive things to participate in. And when you're talking about the socially economic disadvantaged, that has to play a role in it.
Absolutely.
And somewhere, LCAP has to look at this and figure out if district money should be spent to help these programs, help solve the problem. I mean, if there is a problem, which there is, obviously. But all of these programs are very, very costly. And so the parents have to be, and yes, we can say they're voluntary. Yes, you can put in big print, voluntary contribution, but it always isn't perceived as something some children or students want to do. They just don't feel they belong.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an issue that affects all of these things, whether it's Hispanic, Latino, underprivileged. I mean, it's money, and we need to face that issue.
Yep. Great. There's a lot that you guys brought that needs to be digested, and all what you have said is in our periphery. It's a matter of putting it together and to have a bigger conversation as a district and as a site. We're not just talking about access to academies. There's so many different areas where our students are not engaged. You can go into the basketball game, Santa Barbara High, Dos Pueblos, San Marcos, and who's at the game. And it's not reflective of the demographics of the school. So this is a bigger conversation more than just the academy. So we're willing to have the conversation. It's within our periphery. And right now we're gearing up to be able to have the conversation through our cultural proficiency initiatives.
I would, direct staff to have another conversation around this topic area. Look at board policies and in terms of consistency, but also look at it in terms of the LCAP, because I think we see that as an opportunity. We see that perhaps even planning for the next LCAP, getting feedback from parents, talking about that, asking those questions, to the community. As Mr. Herons pointed out too, the money is an issue, and I don't know if we've ever gotten an opportunity if we can do a perception survey of parents around those areas, some of the topics we were talking about, but we might be surprised. And so I think that is something that the board, I'm getting a sense that is an area that we want to continue to revisit throughout the coming year, and not find ourselves again, looking at you all and saying, hey, why aren't you doing more? But it's not just you, obviously. It's, as a district, we need to approach things a little differently. So you see benefits and are looked at necessarily as the sort of the canary in the coal mine. We have to look at that. So that's what I would ask for staff. Board, are ready to move on to the next item, which is presentation of assessment model.
Great. So the purpose of the Santa Barbara Unified School District assessment model is to guide students, educators, and families in ensuring college and career readiness for all district graduates. The model is comprised of several assessments designated to monitor students' growth K-12. I'm going to kind of give you some context as to why this was we developed this. The genesis of the assessment model is the result of a 2-day conversation. Our elementary and secondary principals, assistant principals, and cabinet members engaged in this last summer. The reason and goal for the 2-day conversation was to establish coherence in our understanding and interpretation of what it is we expect our students to know and be able to demonstrate as graduates of Santa Barbara Unified School District. We then unpacked the expectation for each grade level from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade and assigned data points or markers so that we can monitor progress and respond collectively when a response is warranted. Dr. Ramirez and I will take turns in talking about the different data points and purpose behind them. I believe you have 2 sheets that you reviewed. One is what you see before here, which is a description of the assessment continuum. And then you also have another document that has the definition of the purpose for each assessment. I'll first talk about just the college and career readiness indicators. And those are what we call our final indicators of whether we feel that we have achieved. So so in that conversation, we established that students that have completed A through G courses as seniors is an indicator that we need to consider as whether we met the criteria for college readiness. We also looked at the Smarter Balance assessment in the 11th grade. As you know, the Smarter Balance assessment is at the high school is one time, which is during the 11th grade for English Language Arts and ELA, and soon to come science. So the results of those will indicate whether students have met the standards and are college and career ready. Actually, if you go back to the document, the EAP. And if you scroll, maybe just scroll back up over to the top. There you go. The EAP is an assessment we currently use. I'm sorry. The EAP is now actually being taken out. It used to be part of the STAR assessment system, but the Smarter Balance will now take over that area of the EAP. We also want to focus on SAT and SAT results. SAT Aspire. Since physical fitness is a major focus for the district, the PFT results is the area we need to focus on, and advanced placement and international baccalaureate results as well. And soon to come, you don't see it there, but soon to come is a career technical education certification outcomes. And that is something that the state is expecting all secondary schools to develop, and that's why these CTE pathways and academies are so important. Because we will be measured as to how many students are either A through G or have completed some kind of certification. Before I pass it on to Dr. Ramirez and to talk about the leading indicators, in terms of CTE programs, I want to make sure that the community understands that when we talk about having a certification, we're talking about, for example, successful completion of a sequence of aligned courses to support some kind of a career. For example, construction pathway includes both successful completion of A through G requirements and successful completion of a construction course sequence that leads to some industry certification. We want to make sure that that's heard loud and clear, that we're not avoiding A through G by going through some kind of, by assigning some kind of certification pathway. You will actually still have to complete the A through G courses and while you attain your certification in some career. With that said, I'll let Dr. Ramirez talk about some of the indicators that we're going to monitor as students matriculate from kindergarten over to 12th grade.
Good evening, Board President, Dr. Paz. One other point a couple of points that I wanted to highlight with what you see here. Historically, in our district, we've been very, very reliant upon summative measures. The challenge with summative or end of grade span or end of trajectory entirely outcomes is that they only provide us a snapshot back in time. The idea is to have a healthy balance between most formative or largely formative assessments and those that are summative, and the two should inform one another. So what you see here is an attempt throughout the grade spans, and we're trying to have this build out even into our early childhood, preschool span, is to ensure that we have real-time data. Now, the benefits of this are really numerous, but I'll just recap a few. First is, as a district, it really improves our data literacy. It really improves an area that has been not necessarily our strong suit to this point, but it's one that is going to be very important in terms of how it begins to inform a number of other areas, including curricular and instructional decisions. It aligns and it becomes a real nexus between PLC collaboration and really informing the practices of teachers at the classroom level. At the school and district level, it has the benefit of allowing us to really take a hard look at our resource allocation, at trends and patterns that develop in terms of student learning and student mastery and progression toward mastery of content standards at the grade level. So what you see here is a first iteration of that, and it's by no means all-encompassing, because there are a number of assessments that have taken place at the site level that continue that aren't reflected here. But what you see here really is a commitment. It's a commitment to commonalities and common ways of beginning to deal with our work. And one of the really fascinating parts about this is all of the unintended consequences, if you will, all of the reactions and changes that have been brought upon just in this past since we really implemented this coming into this year. We've developed calendars and tried to really align our efforts, and just a number of different conversations are being had that are going to allow us to operate in a more transparent fashion with the community, and to really get down to the point where we're having very informative two-way conversations with our parents, because this way our parents don't just get an end-of-year summary, but really have a greater sense of where their child is at any point throughout the year. Ideally, we want to be able to have a snapshot down to the day, but a lot of these assessments begin to give us that, and they will build out, as we move forward into just being a better and better, for us to have increasingly better ways of being able to inform our practices. So just at the elementary level, you see that there is a combination, again, of formative and summative assessments. And even within the formative assessments, there's a number of variances within that. They also span different types of platforms. You have certain assessments there that are computer adaptive, and you have others that are literally one-to-one. Again, acknowledging that we're talking about a very unique set of students that have very unique set of needs. A child that is 6 or 7 years old naturally has a different attention span and a different sensibility than a teenager or a soon-to-be adult, young adult. So what you see there are summative assessments by way of the physical fitness test, CASP or Smarter Balanced Assessments, as well as CELT. You could consider that really a summative assessment. It's a one-time-a-year assessment that is directed at English learners. But even within that, you're going to see that those are the traditional measures that we've seen, that you've probably seen in front of you a number of times. Where I think the power lies in this is in looking at other assessments that have been in our system, but perhaps haven't been as coherent and as consistent as they otherwise could have been. And again, coming back to the commitments, coming back to ensuring that the things that we have in our system, the assessments that we've had in our system historically, are functioning and serving the needs that we need them to serve. So this year, at the elementary level, we made a commitment to a suite of assessments in STAR 360, and that includes early literacy, and that's for our pre-readers. That's for as young as preschool. STAR reading for students that are already in the reading pathway, and also math. So one of the areas that we've yet to build out, or we are building out just increasingly, is math, because the competencies in math are significantly different than they were in previous iterations of content standards. Also, what you see there is the KSEP, which is something that has been in our system, an assessment that has been in our system, that we want to continue to raise its profile, because it's something that early childhood educators know has a great deal of value, and is very research-based. So I invite you to look at this as a way of beginning to address that continuum from most formative to most summative, and also addressing different learner profiles, if you will. We have the CELT there, which is a more summative assessment, but we also have the ADEPT, which is going to be more formative in nature, and again, part of our system already. But as we re-engage into this, we're looking at just strengthening our practices and becoming more and more consistent. What we ultimately want to do, and I'll just leave this before Dr. Draddy can go back to the secondary, is again to reiterate the point of the benefits of this. As we move forward with a real comprehensive needs assessment that will contain surveys from the community, a number of other things that will come just through the LCAP process, we want to make sure that as we embark upon really determining what the LCAP will look like for this coming year, and as we engage in that process, that we're also looking at those academic and performance needs in real time, not end of high school, as maybe you were seeing in some of the presentations that were just presented a little earlier, but really looking at from even within year and how that's progressing. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Dr. Draddy.
So in the secondary, it's been fascinating. In the past, just the idea of assessing students' abilities to read hasn't been a part of our system. But the focus has always been on students that are EL learners, where you would identify their Lexile levels. But right now we're in a process. Right now we have made a commitment through this process to have Lexile scores of all of our students from 7th grade all up to 12th grade, and the following year the idea to take it over to the seniors. But just having that data K-12 has been very illuminating for our principals, and it has changed the conversation just around the LCAP and what we need to spend money on, and what our focus will be. So it's doing exactly what we wanted it to do. And incidentally, every summer for 2 days we will have what we call a data summit. And so the development of this was the first step in the data summit. The second piece will be actually to analyze the data that we had a conversation that we developed so throughout the year. One assessment I do want to point out, and this is the piece that we think is probably the most powerful in really changing instruction, but the hardest to get to people, for people to understand, which is the common formative assessments. And the idea behind that is we want our kindergartners to guarantee essential learnings. We want a first grader to guarantee essential learnings, and second graders and so on. And the way you do that is by having the teams in that grade level or subject area have a conversation around what the expected learning outcomes will be in the form of a task. So if we go, say, 3 units in a math series, math units, then then there's an assessment that the team puts together, which is in form of performance task, that the teachers develop, they agree on, and they go implement. And the idea is that you then develop your lesson plans that are aligned to that assessment. That is the only assessment in this entire continuum that will tie the outcome to the teacher's practice. So in that assessment, we don't really even necessarily want numbers. We want adjectives describing what students learned versus didn't learn, and triangulation to the actual lesson plans. So that's because that's what's going to change the practice. So that's something that's new here. It's the hardest to implement, but it's probably going to be the most powerful in to get those results. We take the learning from there and match it to all the other summative assessments that you see there, like the Smarter Balance block assessments that are not controlled by us but purchased from the state, and then we calibrate our common assessments to that to ensure that we're hitting the right targets. So those are the conversations we're having. We're excited about this. We think it'll help us have better conversations around the LCAP. We think if the board buys into it, we'll, when somebody comes in with a lot of different ideas, we would love to point to how whatever it is that people bring up or is going to influence those results, because we feel those assessments out there are going to be our indicators to tell us whether we're making progress with our students or not. So with that, I'll leave it up for questions.
Ms. Limon.
Thank you. I think this was actually a very interesting conversation, and I think it also is a reflection of the direction that our district has as far as, thinking more, in some ways, sophisticated about some of these issues as far as what are we looking at to determine whether our students are succeeding or not. I mean, I think that that's the basic concept of this for the folks that are watching and can't follow formative or summative. I mean, this is it. It says, here's what we're going to look at at each different kind of phase of our school system to figure out whether our students are successful or not. I have a question about how this aligns, and not just to the LCAP, but to our strategic plan. And the reason I ask this is because there are things in our strategic plan, things that have been brought forward by the public that actually are not measured, but the public and our community feels they're indicators of success. And how do we think about that? For example, there is really nothing in the area of arts, and that is a public comment on a regular basis. It's in our strategic plan. We support it in different ways, and that's just the first one that comes to mind. But how do we think about that? Where the pieces where our community also feels that success for students is to have to place some curricular value in other areas.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. That was a very good question. Actually leads into some conversations that we hope that this will help us have. So in terms of, we heard tonight, for example, some parents and teachers come and express how the arts helps with thinking and the entire intellect of a student's growth. Every time we hear about the proposal for art, that's the nexus they make. I think our next question is we need to find out if that's actually true in monitoring that. If we implement something, or the arts program, is it impacting what they say is impacting? And obviously everybody appreciates the arts and no one wants to get away from it. But I think we need to be clear on exactly what's going to move the needle, what's not going to move the needle, and if we need to make adjustments within the program to help us move the needle, then we need to, within the arts, then we need to make those decisions.
And the other, sorry, Dr. Ramirez, did you want to add?
I did. I just wanted to add to that because I know that the focal point of the comment had to do with the elementary, but I think it's true for the secondary as well. One of the most challenging things that we're considering as we build out our instructional practice and curricular design is the notion of integration, of having the arts not viewed or I'm just using the arts as an example, but it really can apply to any other domains or subjects. Not viewed in isolation, not viewed as removed from. The standards themselves, for example, call for literacy in mathematics. That literacy in mathematics wasn't always a focal point. We knew that there was a strong language base in the discipline, but it wasn't necessarily something that was always taught in a very intentional or addressed in a very intentional way. So whether it be the arts or music or any other aspect of what we would call the core, what we want to ensure is that there is integration, that there's an opportunity to really revisit how we're building out our programs to really increase the intentionality, because we know that there's value in all of this, and some things that can't be measured, as you alluded to earlier, including life experience, exposure, awareness, and a number of other things that, and just that spark, where a 6-year-old may decide that they want to be an artist as a result of being in an atmosphere that is conducive to that form of thinking, where maybe their surroundings or their home life or just their life experience wouldn't otherwise lend itself for that. We don't want to minimize that. We want to incorporate it. But I think that the important thing with something like this is that we do that in a very intentional way, so that it's not just viewed as something additional or as an add-on, but really something that is helping us at all levels get to our core purpose, which is providing students, by the time they leave high school, with every opportunity for college and career, and for the workplace or for the classroom at Harvard. It wouldn't make a difference. The idea is that they then have the onus of choice, as opposed to something that doesn't meet that challenge.
And I appreciate those remarks, because actually that hearing that there's the possibility of integration is really important, because what I'm not advocating for is to go crazy on creating more assessment tools. I feel like this takes time, and the truth is that the folks that are going to be doing the majority of this are the teachers. And so to add more tools for the purpose of more assessment tools or processes for the purpose of just adding more, I think can also have some downfalls. So I appreciate hearing how important it is that some of what we do is integrated to the assessment tools we already have. Thank you.
And if I can just comment on that, because part of our discussion was throughout those days with leadership was, this is our first attempt. This is our first iteration. This list could have been far more robust. A lot of different voices in the room. We really wanted to start to identify what the functions and purposes were behind each one of these assessments. So the commitments really were about commitments that we could all hold, that we could all get behind. As we come into our data conversation here at the end of this year, part of the discussion will be to loop back to this and see, is there redundancy? Where is there something that, by way of teachers, is coming across as unclear or perhaps not quite fitting the bill or the original intent? And that's part of what we'll revisit, because we don't want to make it a cumbersome process. We want to make it really streamlined, and that's part of the reason why there is a lot of choice in terms, not choice, but a lot of variation in terms of what would be most labor intensive to a teacher in the classroom, and those things that are more computer adaptive, that do require time, but allow for more of that time to be spent on what happens after you get the results, as opposed to just administering an assessment.
Ms. Parker, and no? Okay. Ms. Heidelson.
Just a real quick comment. I just, as a parent and hearing from the public, and I feel that we've got so many assessments going on in 11th grade for our students, and I know this is what's required, but when we have a Smarter Balance test on top of many students taking multiple SATs, multiple ACTs, subject tests, and AP tests, and then to have a Smarter Balance 11th grade test, how would you justify that to parents or the public when they say our kids are way over-assessed at this point, when they're really, from what I'm getting from these students, not don't have their focus on the Smarter Balance test in 11th grade? Are we basing a lot of credence on this test to really tell us where our students are at that point?
Yes, yeah, the question you asked is really related to the commitment to the Smarter Balance, or whether we actually find that as a viable source or not. So I think from the state has already determined that in policy, the universities. So as a result, our success in that, or a lack of success, would determine how we function here, how the state considers us, and how real estate considers us. Let's say if Santa Barbara High doesn't do well in the Smarter Balance at some point, and Dos Pueblos does, I will venture to say that people will have an opinion about Santa Barbara High versus Dos Pueblos based on those results. Yes, but the assessments at the secondary, the only new one you will see there is the SRI. Right now, we don't have any, and we're selling that in a way to say that we don't have any way of understanding whether our students are able to read or not read, and where they are, and as a result, we can't intervene.
And when will that test be given, the SRI, exactly?
In the beginning of the year.
For each grade level?
For each grade level, but you're supposed to give three assessments, in the beginning, middle, and end, to get a calibrated result. So that's the model, and it's about a 15 to 20-minute test assessment on the computer. And the way the secondary principals have done it is that they have shared the load in the different classes. English teacher would do it one day, social science teacher would do it another day, and so on.
I just have one comment that would be somewhat helpful, I think, in looking at these. And one is to kind of think about them as external and internal assessments that we're asking students to do. And thinking about that, ultimately aligning it in terms of what we would like to see as outcomes. You know, we have a Common Core, we have a set of sort of values that the Common Core is putting out that we expect students to have. Alongside of that, we have A through G requirements that we have some values as to what we expect, that students have the choice of going to a higher education institution or not, you know, based on A through G. So it would be really helpful if you look at these indicators, because the indicators, all they are is a dipstick along the way. Basically, if you had a car, you take out the dipstick and figure it out, right? But it doesn't really tell you, you know, it gives you one indicator of how well the engine or the car is doing. At the end of the day, you may have a set of outcomes for that car. You may want to buy a Jeep that goes off-roading. That's one set of outcomes that you want to have, a car that goes off-roading. You may just want to have a car that's very efficient, that's going to give you a bunch of gas mileage, right? So it would be helpful if you look at these indicators and alongside them, how the outcomes that we have, whether they're internal or external. And then also looking at some of these assessments and just noting down, you know, is an internal assessment that we have, right? The K-SUP is an internal assessment. It's not state required. We're doing it because we think it's a good thing. And the same thing goes for this SRI. So I think that would be helpful, at least for the board may be helpful, even for parents may be helpful in terms of that, because they can understand why are you doing this? Well, the outcome is to do this. We want to do this. And it's a measurement of this, right? So that would be a helpful thing to do, at least from my perspective. Board, any other comments, questions? If not, I just want to thank you, and it looks really good from my perspective, and I'm glad you guys are doing this because it's one step, as you've said, to figuring out what we're doing and how well we're doing it. The last item on the agenda is discussion and administrative regulation 7215, fundraising for the purposes of augmenting bond and capital funds.
So at a previous board meeting, I believe you requested that we bring this item forward for discussion and have a conversation around our current practices versus what the board policy actually states.
Board, Mr. Herron.
Yeah, I asked for this, and I don't have a solution. I just have concerns on, and it wasn't just on this 75%, as the cover memo says. It has to do with that 75% and in what form it's in. We don't get 75% of the goal in cash in many cases. I'm sure we have some that are personal notes, we have some that are promises, we have some that are pledges. So that's one item. But my more important item was, we have time and time again come up with projects that we get the proposal, we agree to the proposal, and then during the process, the budget changes. I mean, take the greenhouse. I mean, that went from 17,000 to 600,000. But there's nothing in these documents that says what happens if the budget was wrong. And so I'd like to see something in here that, and both on the application, because all the application says, and we have a copy of it, give us a project cost estimate. Now, it doesn't say anything about what if the estimate's wrong. And so then, you know, we get to the point where you're ready to break ground, there's not enough money, and then they come here and plea for developer fees, bond money, district money, and somehow I'd like to see something in here that says, hey, if these numbers are wrong that you're giving us, then here's how we're going to take care of the overage. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but at least it would give us some protection. I mean, we've had to agree to projects because if we don't agree, we've got funders that are mad, we've got projects that aren't going to take place, we've got administrators that want it to happen, and we looked at the bad guys if we say no. I mean, we wouldn't have the Matt Academy if we said no. We wouldn't have the Green Project going if we said no, because there were, and I forget what other, the gymnasium maybe, the big one is our fault, which is Peabody Stadium. We set those numbers. The Education Foundation, or the Santa Barbara Foundation, or Santa Barbara High School Foundation didn't set them, and I'm really happy that they are raising $5 million. But that was our number. They didn't come to us, so we got our own problem there that we're dealing with. But a lot of these projects, it seems to me that the policy and the application needs to cover what happens if the projected budget is wrong. Who's going to pay the overage, and how is it going to be taken care of? And also then, in what do we really mean 75% in cash, or was it a bank statement? But it also says the money will be deposited with the district. I can tell you, we got projects going on that the money is not in the district, even though this board took action to have it come to the district. So, there are things there that need to be cleaned up, and I don't have the answer. That's where I think the problem is.
Mr. Parker.
I absolutely agree with you. And is the shade structure one that we still don't have funding in the bank? I don't know if Ms. Preston might know this, but I don't know if you know, Mr. Herron.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, because I feel like again, we come under tremendous pressure. I know our staff are under tremendous pressure, and so then they turn around and say, yes, we should go ahead and do this, when in fact it contravenes the board policy on it, and we've really let it slide. Sometimes we do need flexibility, but putting the wording around flexibility in there, I think, my suggestion, Mr. Herron, would be that there be some sort of small board committee that works with facilities to talk this through, and with business services to talk through what the wording in this policy should be around exceptions, around changes, or when a bid comes back too high, because I don't feel like we've made a decision that's been bad,
No,
but
could be.
it could be, and previous boards have. Previous boards have gotten in a bind where things, went out and there really wasn't the funding for it, and school sites or foundations were paying us back over decades. And it ends up hurting our other students, and it's not
Yeah.
fair. So I just feel like that's something that we need to address.
And I don't want to put, we've got a really, really good community who's funding a lot of our needs. So I'm not aiming at anybody. It's just, we need a policy that everybody follows.
I would agree with the both of you. I think one of the hardest things is to not look like you are the awful board member who's going to say no, or even to open your mouth to say that something went awry and why are we being asked to fund something when we, with all, the right motivations, tentatively approve something or in concept approve something. And then we're asked to come back to approve something that whoa, wow, that is really different. Well, a lot more money. So I find myself in the same situation as the both of you in terms of not wanting to be in that situation. I would entertain the recommendation by Ms. Parker in terms of having a smaller board committee along with staff to look at this policy and try to figure out what best approach we could have. Because I do feel that my gut feeling is that sometimes I feel like we're essentially writing a blank check. And I don't want to be in that situation. And that's bad. And I almost feel like at times I'm making a choice for other folks in the district because the cost has gone up. And we're not funding something else that we may equally need. And that is really hard for me to do. And so I would agree with both of you at this point in time. Any other comments, board?
Yes, I'll volunteer Mr. Herron.
I'll be happy to volunteer.
Equally, I would be happy to participate with Mr. Herron as well. Any other thoughts? If not, that is the last item. And any coming events? Board, any future agenda items?
Just one, I passed this on to Dr. Cash earlier, but I read somewhere today that City College is in the process of creating a plan for free tuition and books for our high school graduates. Now, it's not in writing yet, it's a concept, but the foundation is trying to figure out a way to do it. And I've asked that be put on the common agenda for the meeting we have with the City College in March.
And if no one has read the piece, it was in the channels. The channels, yeah, the Santa Barbara City College channels, online paper.
Right. Okay, no other items. We will adjourn till February 9th, 2016. Thank you all.